It is Friday night, East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Come on in, gather around. We're going to talk Michigan State sports. Like we usually do once a week. Haven't done it in a few weeks. Had that NCAA tournament thing going on and had a few other things going on last week. We're in the middle of Michigan State spring football. As we record this, we are 8 days away from Michigan State's annual spring scrimmage. You can call it the green-white game if you want. Whatever you want to call it, it's going to be going on at Spartan Stadium a week from tomorrow as we record this. You might be listening to this, watching this on Saturday or Sunday. It might be a countdown, might be spring scrimmage week for you as you're listening to this. But if you're joining us live tonight, we're 8 days out, spring football. We will be talking spring football tonight, some of the developments, improved players that need to continue to step it up this spring. I have to tell you, Paul Konodike will be here around 9:30. Expect him to call in. That's about 20 minutes from now as we record this. And we will compare notes on what we've seen thus far in spring practice. Have to level with you and say that we've seen a little bit of practice. Basically, the main thing we have to go on right now is what the coaches are telling us and what some of the players are telling us, and some of the videos that Michigan State football has been sending out. Throw all that together, come in with the working knowledge that we have, we as media members, yourselves as Michigan State fans, throw it all together, try to make sense of what's going on with spring practice as Michigan State tries to follow up a tremendous 2021 football season in which the Spartans went 11-2, victorious in the Chick-fil-A Bowl, finished, number 10 in the country, whatever it was. Great season for Michigan State. Like Mel Tucker said in January, he and the coaches felt they got everything they could out of last year's roster. Now, as we look forward to 2022 and the years beyond, we look at the roster, changes that are being made, and what it looks like for Michigan State football going forward. We'll be talking about that throughout the course of the evening. If you're new to this thing, my name is Jim Comparoni, publisher of SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com is the Michigan State website for Rivals.com. It's the place for Michigan State football, basketball, analysis, features, recruiting, podcast type content like this, and also the Underground Bunker message board, which is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State football, and the Final Forum message board, which is the church of what's happening now with Michigan State basketball. Those are, in my opinion, biased opinion, the two places you want to be if you're looking for Michigan State conversation, message board style, anywhere on the internet. Been doing it over there since the late 1990s, having fun with it, happy with it. We continue to try to make improvements, try to bring you, bring you the best in Michigan State sports coverage and analysis. Great work, as always, from Paul Konodike, associate editor, SpartanMag.com. Jason Killip, great job recruiting anchor for SpartanMag.com. We look forward to his expertise and contributions to just expand from here. Noah Sprunger, great job as intern extraordinaire. Ricardo Cooney, great job, senior writer for SpartanMag.com, Spartan Magazine for years, back when we had the magazine. And others, Mark Feather doing a good job with us with some things, and other guys. And of course, the subscribers at SpartanMag.com, the posts that you make over there at the Underground Bunker message board really make the site go, really make the SpartanMag.com web community really become a true community. So fist bumps to you guys, pats on the back to you guys and gals, attaboys, attagirls. Great job over at SpartanMag.com. All right, over at SpartanMag.com, I invited earlier today Michigan State fans that are subscribers to SpartanMag.com to post questions over at the Underground Bunker message board, and we will be fielding those questions. We will also be taking some questions over there in the chat area. Feel free to post some questions there. We will get to those as well. So question number one, let's get right to it. Posted earlier today over at SpartanMag.com Underground Bunker message board. Ethan from Birmingham, Michigan, says, as of now, who do you expect to be the most improved Michigan State football player ready to make an impact going into next fall? Most improved. Does Malik Carr count? We saw him scratch the surface with some pass-catching ability late in the season. Bowl game, I think the Penn State game. A lot of talent there, run after the catch. Athlete, can run by you, can jump over you, do those things. He needs to improve his blocking. If his blocking improves, then he becomes an every down, balanced threat. I don't know what that blocking is going to look like. We will begin to get an idea in the spring scrimmage a week from Saturday. But Malik Carr has to be on the short list of people that can make an impact. With Connor Hayward having gone on to the NFL, starting tight end, there's a job opening there. Tyler Hunt's done an okay job there. He's functional. He's been valuable because they didn't have anything in terms of tight ends 2 years ago. Not much anyway. And former punter, former walk-on becomes a serviceable, functional tight end. That was helpful. But Malik Carr, a guy that can take it to the next level. Daniel Barker's going to be transferring in from Illinois. He might be the more go-to complete style tight end. But Malik Carr, a guy that got into the playing group a little bit late in the season. Maybe he becomes, I would imagine he has to become someone that they script into the game plans every week to get him the ball different types of ways. So Malik Carr's got to be on that list. Running back Davion Prim, one of the surprises of the spring. Mel Tucker mentioned him last week. Jay Johnson mentioned him. Been hearing things that's all legit. He has been doing well in practice. In that first scrimmage, he was getting a lot of reps. Getting a lot of high depth chart reps, which was really surprising. Davion Prim was the first member of the recruiting class to commit for the 2021 recruiting class. Then he went out for Oak Park High School and just kind of had a mediocre senior season. I went and watched him in the high school playoffs. I think it might have been the regional finals. And he kind of his running back carries were divided amongst one or two other underclassmen. Short yardage situations, they gave the ball to another guy. He had a fumble that day that I was there. Had one run that looked okay. Came to Michigan State, and I was like, man, I don't know about Davion Prim. Just not sure if what's going to happen there. Last fall, spent one or two practices over in the defensive back room, and didn't see him on the field, didn't see him dress. And that continued to be my opinion of Davion Prim, a guy that his film was just kind of okay, to be honest. Saw him live, and he just kind of okay. Not much last fall, and then you started hearing about him this spring. And I'm looking forward to seeing him in the spring game, spring scrimmage, to see what this is all about. So he's setting out, not that he cares what I think, not that he even knows what I think, but he's setting out to prove me wrong with my initial observations. So in terms of improvement, if he becomes a guy that gets into the playing group in a very deep and competitive running back room, running back competition, if he does that, that would make him the most improved player on the roster, in my opinion. Other guys, Keon Coleman. I mean, everybody is aware of him, 6'4", all the athletic ability in the world. 7 receptions last year as a true freshman. He could come out this year and have 40-plus catches. So if you go from 7 catches to 40, which I think is possible, if not more, he would have to be in that most improved category, even though many of you already know what kind of athlete he is and what's going to be expected of him going forward. So it wouldn't be a surprise if he has a real big sophomore year. But Keon Coleman. In terms of other people that you haven't seen on the field a whole lot, like Davion Prim, Mel Tucker said, I'd keep an eye on Davion Prim, and he's telling us to keep an eye on him. I'd keep an eye on Tank Brown also. Tank Brown, bothered by some injuries last year, former 4-star talent for the Minnesota Gophers. I've been seeing him show up a little bit more this spring. There are job openings at defensive end. I'm not predicting that he's going to have a loud impact this year, but the door is open for someone like him to do something like that. So Tank Brown, put him on that list in terms of people I expect to be the most improved. Some of these guys are people I expect to be most improved. Some are people that need to be most improved. And I'd put Angelo Cross in that category. Angelo Cross, impact freshman as a nickel 2 years ago. And then last fall, they moved him to safety. He's a guy that played corner in high school, played corner and then nickel as a freshman at Michigan State. He was new to safety. Deep ball judgment and other instinctive things that take place in the secondary back there. He looked like he was inexperienced back there. He's a sound tackler, hard, tough football player. Maybe not the great straight speed guy. So he's going to have to make up for that with knowledge of the position, which is something he didn't have last year, and it showed a few times. For the bowl game, they moved him back to nickel and moved Darius Snow to safety to take a look at that. And then they made the determination for Darius Snow to move back down and actually made him a linebacker. He's added about 10 pounds to Darius Snow. So Darius Snow out of the running at safety. So now Angelo Cross is back there. A guy that led the nation in snaps played more snaps than any college football player in the nation last year on the defensive side of the ball. So he's rugged, he's durable, played through a wrist ailment last year. That's valuable in itself. He's functional, is valuable, but can he do more to make himself a good player at the safety position? A plus player. That needs to happen for this defense to take the next step. He's a good, honest, noble, earnest football player. He's got everybody's respect. It's a difficult position to play, especially if you're just learning it. They need some improvement there. I'd also keep an eye on Jeff Pietrowski, defensive end. I know my guy Big Mooby's really excited about Pietrowski. And, Pietrowski's been a solid guy his first 2 years. Potentially a guy that may be coming close to, plateauing off and hitting his ceiling. But now you bring in Brandon Jordan, the new pass rush specialist coach. What impact might he have on someone like Pietrowski? Again, with Beasley graduating and Panashuk moving on, there are job openings at defensive end. Pietrowski's got a chance to get in there and get more snaps. He's been solid, functional. Can he be better than that? With the new coaching, can he become better than that? I'd keep an eye on it. I know, Ron Big Movie Armstrong has he kind of thinks that Pietrowski's got a chance to be a guy that could lead Michigan State in sacks this year. I'm not sure Michigan State has a guy that can get like 9 or 10 sacks on the year. It might be sacks by committee, which is usually not a great thing. But Pietrowski, he's been solid, but keep an eye on him as a candidate to possibly be most improved, a candidate for most improved this year. All right, so let's see who we've got. We got a number of people in here already. I'm going to go ahead. I need to send out a tweet to let people know that this nonsense is going on because, as you know, I don't have a producer here. State in sacks this year. I'm not sure Michigan State has a guy that can get like 9 or 10 sacks on the year. It might be sacks by committee. And we're all right with that. It's been it's this little venture, this SpartanMag channel here at YouTube has become a lot of fun. We appreciate those of you that have become subscribers. Make sure to give us a thumbs up. That helps get the word out about this little podcast, helps it get it out to Michigan State fans because we have tags on it that are Michigan State. And if there are thumbs up associated with it, then people that do Michigan State searches will find our podcast, and that's what we want. Make it bigger, better, and it helps with us in terms of our resources to help bring you better coverage, not only here. Here's where we talk about things, but the real coverage is over at SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber over there, or at least consider it. We'd love to have you a subscriber at SpartanMag.com. Monthly, about $8 a month. Also, and it's I got to say, it's real good. We do our best with analysis and just overall top-to-bottom coverage. If you're here and we still have your attention at this point, then you are a candidate to become a mag, or get over there and check it out. In the meantime, press the subscribe button here if you have not already. Become a subscriber to this channel so that you'll know when this nonsense is going on. Let me go ahead and tweet this out. We're live right now via Spartan Mag Live. Join us here. Link. All right, so there's that. All right, let's go to question number 2 over here in the mailbag. This is a long one. It's Brett from Linwood, New Jersey. He says, what do you think it will take for Michigan State to start landing some of these top 100 4- and 5-star recruits? Will Michigan State be able to do it by traditionally recruiting them, or do you think they will need to take the next step and start offering huge NIL deals? Yeah, I think NIL is going to come into it when you're going for recruits that are the 5-star recruits nationally. Because if you're going after 5-star recruits nationally, those are Southern schools, Southern players, and the SEC is going to be all over it with the NILs. Michigan State's going to need to do that too. Excuse me with my cough there. That's not it. So that's got to be a part of it. Some of the local ones in the state of Michigan, that will be a component, maybe not as important, but increasingly going forward, that's going to be part of the recruiting piece. As far as getting some of these top 100, or 4-star and 5-stars like you're talking about. Well, 5-stars, there's only 17 5-stars in the country right now in the Rivals.com rankings. Only 17 5-stars. So there's a really small pool of 5-stars. And as we go along, it'll probably expand to 25, maybe 29, not usually more than 30. 17 of them. Dante Moore, the quarterback for Detroit, he is one of them. As far as where the other 5-stars are from, there's 5 from Florida, 3 from Texas, 2 from California, 2 from Louisiana. So good luck going to Florida to beat out Alabama and Georgia and Florida for 5 stars in Florida, or 3 stars and 3 of them in Texas. Michigan State's in on a defensive end from Texas. And the Brandon Jordan thing is a little bit of, that changes things up a little bit because he is nationally renowned in terms of being a pass rush teacher, pass rush coach of the NFL Stars. So when that happens, that's something Michigan State's never had before. Mel Tucker's a different type of recruiter than they've had before. So mix that together, and I don't want to shut the door on the possibilities there. But two 5 stars from Louisiana. There's one from D.C. He's a freakazoid defensive end also, and he's thinking about visiting Michigan State. But, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, everybody's in on him also. He can go anywhere he wants. Maryland, Miami. He's a D.C. guy. 6'5". Nicholas, I forget his last name, but he recently ran like a 10.3 in the 100 meters at 6'5". That's why he's a 5-star defensive end, just freakazoid type of guy. But the more of those guys Michigan State gets involved with, you throw a bunch of mud on the wall, as Nick Saban used to say, and after a while some of it sticks, then you throw more up there and more of it sticks. You throw more up there and more of it sticks. Michigan State's out there throwing buckets of mud out there for those 5 stars and 4 stars. We'll see. So what will it take? As far as those guys go, those 5 stars, David Hicks is the defensive end from Katy, Texas. Michigan State's in on a little bit. But A&M is all over him, and you saw A&M, the NIL money they were throwing around last year. Going to be hard to beat Texas and Texas A&M down there. For that guy, Brandon Jordan could make a difference. As for other 4 stars, Michigan State has commitments from 3 4 stars right now. The current recruiting class, the incoming freshmen, there were 5 4 stars. And Michigan State had the number 23 recruiting class in the country. So if 5 gets you a top 25 class, if they get 10 4 stars this year, which I think is possible, should be able to get a top 15 class as possible. I know Mel Tucker's shooting for better than that. Not that he cares about recruiting rankings, but I think if he gets the type of people he's hoping to get, then the rankings will reflect that. As far as 4 stars right now, Michigan State with 3 commitments. They've got 5 commitments right now. 3 of them are 4-star players. Running back Kedrick Riscano from New Caney, Texas. So there's a running back from Texas they went down there and got. Going to have to battle to hold on to him. That's just the nature of recruiting, right? Also, tight end 4-star Brendan Parachek from Dexter, Michigan. Defensive end Andrew DePape from Pleasant Valley, Iowa. 3 4 stars already. As far the 4 stars that are coming in from the 2022 class, Jeremy Bernard, who's doing really well in spring practice right now, wide receiver. Dylan Tatum, safety, was a real good skill position player on offense at high school, West Bloomfield, making the transition. It's good that he's here early. He's got a long way to go to learn how to play defense at the college level. I've been saying that all along. Got some good wheels, though. Jayden Magnum, he's repping right now as like a second-string safety. And if Angelo Cross doesn't improve, Mangum's going to be banging on that door. Jayden Magnum, true freshman right now. A little bit on the thin, wiry side because he's a teenager. He's a young guy, but keep an eye on him. Defensive tackle Alex Van Sumeren. He's on campus right now going through spring practice, as is quarterback Caton Hauser. So all 5 of those guys, it occurs to me now, all 5 of Michigan State's 4-star recruits are on campus right now, enrolling early and part of spring practice. So those are the 4-star guys. As far as 4-star guys that have visited lately, defensive end Rico Walker from Hickory, North Carolina, ranked number 214 in the country, number 214 player in the country. He visited last week. Jason Killip with a really good article about him and his what he thought of his visit. And Walker really impressed with Michigan State. He'll be taking other visits, but Michigan State rolled out some pretty good red carpet and walked him through the paces. He saw practice, saw meetings, was in with the coaches, including Brandon Jordan, Marco Coleman, new defensive line coach. He was impressed. So Michigan State probably get him on campus again, I would imagine. Amir Herring, offensive lineman from West Bloomfield, he was on campus. Amir Herring might not fit the size requirements Michigan State's really excited about or wants to get. They like guys that are 6'5" and taller on the offensive line. Herring's about 6'3". He's a 4-star guy. He was on campus. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But others, like for the spring game coming up next weekend, Ryan Yates, corner, 6'2", Denton, Texas, number 73 in the country. There's a top 100 from Texas, and Michigan State's right in there with him. Etta Enow is a defensive end from Coleyville, Texas, number 219 in the country. That's another 4-star from Texas. Michigan State in on him. Also, Big-time running back, Reuben Owens out of El Campo, Texas, number 26 player in the country. Really, really big-time running back. He's supposed to be visiting for the spring game. All the great ones are after him. A&M, Texas, Alabama. He's coming to visit Michigan State and check it out, though. And if you get him on campus, you've got a chance. Getting back to the initial question, what kind of chance does Michigan State have to start getting some of these 4 stars and 5 stars? Well, they're not going to get all of them, but some of these names I'm mentioning, they're going to have a shot. You know, this summer when you're looking at official visits, Miles McVay's a guy Michigan State's been recruiting for a long time, offensive lineman from East St. Louis, Illinois, number 56 player in the country, big offensive lineman. I think he camped at Michigan State last year. Michigan State's been in there from the beginning. They'll have as good a chance as anybody. I mentioned Ryan Yates, corner from Denton, Texas, number 73 in the country. He'll be taking an official visit to Michigan State, I think, in June. Clay Wedden, offensive tackle from Tampa. Peyton Kirkland, offensive lineman from Orlando. Jamal Anderson, linebacker from Georgia. Some of them we'll get to that later. Let's see what Konendijk has to say.
Call from
Paul Konendijk.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail.
All right, let's bring him in. We got associate editor of SpartanMag.com, the venerable, the colossus of clout, Paul Konendijk. How you doing, Paul? Doing all right, man?
Yeah, I don't know if you can be venerable in a colossus, but I'll try my best.
All right. So Konendijk has been doing a great job covering spring practice for us over there at SpartanMag.com. We had a VCast over there about a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. We've not had a chance to really compare notes on other things that have happened. Mel Tucker's press conference last week, Chris Kapilovic with his press address last week and also this week. Courtney Hawkins spoke about wide receivers, and Harlan Barnett spoke about defensive backs. And I mentioned earlier to the viewing and listening audience that we have had a chance to watch a little bit of practice and see some of the film that the university is releasing. Between that and what the coaches have been telling us, we kind of try to feel around in the dark a little bit and get a handle on what's going on with Michigan State's spring practice. And I've talked a little bit about some of the players that we've heard about that are improving, and we'll get into that a little bit deeper. But Paul, if you were to make a list of 1 or 2 or 3 things that have caught your ear or caught your eye about spring practice thus far, what would they be?
Well, maybe that's something that's caught my ear, but I would just say I feel like I better have a better grasp of what's going on. I feel like last year at this time when we were doing these type of podcasts or you know, I was doing radio shows or you're doing radio shows, a lot of it is guesswork. You know, I feel like after, you know, like last spring, watching some stuff and then seeing what happened in the season, I feel like I know what they want to do, where they're going, and I feel like I got a better idea of what they've got personnel-wise. This spring, it just seems kind of like the big thing for me is, you know, putting that next layer on, you know, getting some areas that need to get tightened up. And, you know, just the thing that I guess the biggest thematic difference between this year and last for me is I feel like they've got a lot more bodies on campus that we know what they're going to do or we know what they're supposed to do, as opposed to a bunch of guys that are might be's or could be's, or, you know, how are they going to fit? And I feel like, you know, with the amount of attrition that went on last year, the amount of guys coming into the program, you know, the amount of guys coming back, I just feel like we've got a better grasp on what's going on with Michigan State football and where the thing is headed. That's not to say there's not holes. I mean, the offensive line is paper thin right now, and you know, there's other areas that need to be addressed. But I just feel like overall, you know, big picture, you know, you kind of have a better feel of what's going on.
Definitely a better picture of what's going on in the defensive backfield. We knew that was a challenge last year, and when we saw the spring scrimmage last year, the guys that were playing corner were a bunch of walk-ons. Nothing against Zach Denha and some of those people, but they didn't really get on the field in the fall. And Mel Tucker and Harlan Barnett said as much after the spring game. You know, we're probably not going to be playing with those guys. At that time, we knew that Michigan State had commitments from 3 or 4 transfer portal corners that were not able to get on campus in time to play last spring. And then last fall, we saw some of those corners do some good things individually at times, but collectively the defensive backfield, of course, the opposition put up big numbers through the air. But individually, you know, Kimbrough had some moments. Ronald Williams looked good at times. Marquis Lowry looked good at times. Angelo Cross back there at safety. It was a tough baptism for him back there at times. Xavier Henderson had a real good first 2/3 of the season, battled through a lower body ailment later in the year, toughed it out, but didn't didn't quite have the speed late in the year that he had earlier in the year. It all wound up to giving up too many yards to too many opponents through the air. Everybody knows that. But we shouldn't have been surprised by most of that, maybe not to that extent in terms of the numbers that were allowed, but at this level in the Big Ten with the schedule that Michigan State played, when you're trotting out a defensive backfield that was just getting to know each other in August. And you and I talked about that in the VCasts last year during preseason camp. And we asked Mel Tucker about it. How early can you get, how quickly can you get these defensive backs who have not played together before to play together and do well and learn the system and all those things? Mel Tucker, not a guy to make excuses. He says, we're going to have to get it done. Well, when he talked to someone like Angelo Cross, he said last week or earlier this week, we were playing with guys that hadn't played together. That makes perfect sense. Big difference this year. You've got those guys back. Ronald Williams last year was playing college football for the first time in his life. Major college football. Chester Kimbrough played a little bit at Florida, I think. Marquis Lowry had redshirted at Louisville. But now they've all played a little bit. They've learned a few things. Now they're getting now they're all in competition with one another because Amir Speed has been added to the mix from Georgia, and he's been impressing everybody. So I'm expecting, and most people are expecting, Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're expecting Ronald Williams and Amir Speed to be the first-string corners when they trot out for practice, for the open practice in the green-white game, the spring scrimmage. That's 6'2" and 6'3". That's a lot of length at corner. Harlan Barnett says it's the longest corners he's ever coached at the college level. And then you've got, Kimbrough and Lowry competing possibly for that nickel job. Michigan State might revert back to having a corner at that nickel spot like they did at the outset of the 2020 season when Shaq Brown began the season as the nickel, and then injuries forced him to go back to the outside and play regular corner, and then Angelo Cross moved in at nickel. So competition all of a sudden with players that have been here, they've started, they know the system. One way or another, you'll have some starting corners that are going to be second string. That in and of itself, not a bad thing for the corner situation. So when you talk about things that are different, and we know we have fewer guesswork, less guesswork, secondary is where there's less guesswork compared to last year, and the numbers kind of showed that last fall with the way things went. I think that's got to be good news for Michigan State on defense with these bodies on defense.
That's a huge deal, and there's going to be naysayers out there. People say, "Well, look how bad they were last year. They were just terrible." And I don't think it was a physical thing. I mean, it just felt like all last year that the sum of the parts wasn't what it should be, and and that comes down to inexperience, and not just defensive backs. You're talking about inexperience at linebackers. I mean, really, when you look at the defense as a whole, the only proven commodities were on that defensive line. So it was a tough slog. I'm bullish on Ronald Williams Jr. That's a guy that was a junior college All-American, but he started out wide receiver, got thrown in the mix at corner a little bit, did pretty well for a year, and then went to Alabama, broke his arm at Alabama, and last year was, like you mentioned, that was his first real taste of college football. I feel like looking at him physically and watching him in practice, I feel like he's leaner this year, and I think he's moving better. And I think last year he was pretty muscled up, but I think this year he looks a little bit more like a racehorse, as my grandfather would say, instead of a workhorse. And that's a lot of length out there, and that can create a lot of problems. But I do think the competition at corner is going to be pretty good, especially when you got a guy, like a guy like Chuck Brantley. Now he's still coming back from his injury, but he's going to be in the mix. And I like Marquis Lowry a little bit for that nickel spot because I think Marquis Lowry's got something to him. He's another guy that's long. I think Chester Kimbrough is okay, and I think he's got some talent as well. But Marquis Lowry's got something. He's got kind of more of an it factor in my mind because he brings it, and I wasn't sure what to expect out of him. Seeing his body type coming in from Louisville, I think maybe he's one of these quote cover guys, or that's what he's going to try to be. But he's more physical than I thought he'd be, and to me, I think a nickel has to be a little bit physical. I think Kimbrough tries to be physical, but I think he's a little bit injury. He's a little bit smaller of a body, maybe a little bit more injury prone there. But I like some of the things I think Marquis Lowry can do. And I think the defensive back picture is going to be a lot better. And I think with those corners being able to play at a higher level, getting coached up by Coach Barnett and Coach Tucker, working with those guys, I think it's going to be a good deal. And I think it's nice for Barnett where he doesn't have to coach up like he had last year with Tavares Tillman, who's at Georgia Tech. But I felt like Barnett was doing as much showing him the ropes as he was teaching Tillman was teaching corners. And I feel like there's, Barnett's always done good with team teaching. And he doesn't have to teach Tucker.
Right.
Tucker knows exactly what he wants at corner, and I think it's going to work well. High expectations. You can just see the competition level. You can see the level that they're doing reps and drills. It's serious. Everything counts. And Barnett's going to get these guys coached up and get them confident. And it's a lot different playing in the spring, and getting taught in the spring as opposed to getting thrown into the mix. And, nobody's to blame for what happened last year except, Mel Tucker. He wanted a wholesale change of defensive back. He got it. And maybe some of those guys that were shipped out of the program, I can't see how they could have performed any worse than what Michigan State got in the field last year. But Tucker got his guys in the program, and that's going to be a benefit this year. And they took some lumps last year, but it's going to benefit Michigan State this year, having those guys there.
Now, here's a number that I've been throwing around. Michigan State, of course, was just blown out of the water through the air against Ohio State. We saw in the Rose Bowl when Ohio State played against Utah that, Utah had no prayer of stopping them through the air. Now, Ohio State had trouble through the air against Michigan, and I think the 30-degree temperatures had helped a little bit when you've got Sun Belt quarterbacks, Sun Belt wide receivers, and they were not completing passes that they had completed all year. And Michigan was pretty good. But Ohio State, it was just fighter jets all over the place with those wide receivers. They were amazing. So Michigan State was blown out of the water against them, and Purdue just throwing the ball up and down the field. Everybody knows that. But if you look at the numbers, Michigan State was dead last in the country in terms of yards allowed through the air. Now, in terms of yards allowed per pass attempt, which is a more indicative statistic in terms of pass defense, problems or successes, Michigan State was number 67 in the country in yards allowed per pass attempt. Not great, but not bad. Number 10 in the Big Ten. Not great, but not as bad as dead last. I don't look at Michigan State's pass defense last year as being dead last in the country. I think they were number 67 in the country, which puts you in the 50 percentile, which is not great. But considering all the new faces there and what they're trying to get straightened out, that had something to do with it. The other numbers that I put together that I mentioned, and I'll be mentioning it all off season, just bringing it up. Michigan State played 5 of the top 13 pass offenses in the country last year.
Yeah.
5 of the top 13. Western Kentucky was number 1, and they averaged 433 per game through the air. Ohio State was number 3. Purdue was number 5. Right there, you're playing 3 of the top 5. Miami is number 10 in the country. Michigan State gave up yards in that game, but not points. But those yards were part of Michigan State's messy overall statistics. And Maryland, number 13 in the country in yards and passing yardage per game. So if, and I didn't count Pittsburgh because they didn't play the actual quarterback in that game. But, 5 of your 12 regular season games, half of your schedule, top 13 passing attacks, you put that against a lot of new faces, and it looked like it did. They were beaten individually by Ohio State badly, and those guys showed in the NFL Pro Day that they are different types of specimens. But it's not like they were getting beat over and over individually at the corner position. Sometimes Michigan State was doing bend but don't break the first 2/3 of the season. Mel Tucker doesn't like it to call it that, but that's what they did. Maybe that's what they felt they needed to do. So I think last year, I'm just giving some context to some of those numbers. I think there is they can't help but improve, but I think there's good reason to believe there's going to be improvement there. And you make a great point about Mel Tucker taking over the overseeing of the corner position more with Tavares Tillman moving on. Tillman came in for a year and moved on, and that's going to be Michigan State has a chance to improve there, if I can be diplomatic about this a little bit. Now, the spring game is coming up a week from Saturday. It's going to be a scrimmage, not a game. I like a scrimmage because I want to see first string versus first string. I don't want to see a split. It's always interesting back when they used to do a draft, and it was interesting to see what the players, how they felt, who the best players were. That was interesting. But I want to see ones versus ones. If, Spencer Brown's out there, I want to see, if Jared Horst plays, I want to see what Chris Bogle looks like against an established Big Ten offensive tackle starter, those type of things. If Jeremy Bernard is out there at wide receiver, I want to see him against Amir Speed, against Ronald Williams, against established Power 5 starters. I don't want to see him out there when you're dividing the team into two. He might be going against a walk-on all day. So I like the scrimmage. I like the practice. They don't have the scoreboard on. It might not be as good. It might not be compelling viewing for someone watching on TV at home. But you and I will get more out of it because it's a flat practice with a lot of scrimmaging going on. When we are there at the scrimmage, Paul, what are you going to be looking for? What are some positions you're going to be looking for? What are you interested, eager to see?
Well, I kind of want to see what's going on at running back, and I think it's really going to be hard to figure out because of the depth of the offensive line. But I want to see. But what I want to see from running back is I want to see how those different pieces fit together. I know it's pretty obvious that Michigan State's not going to have a Ken Walker the third this year. But what I want to see is I want to see how those pieces. I want to see if they have complementary pieces in that tailback deal and see where everybody's at and what people are doing. And I think we can get. I think there's only about 7 healthy offensive linemen at this point, and two of those guys are loners from the D line. Loner walk-ons. So there's not you're not going to get a whole lot, but I really kind of want to see what those running backs can do. And I really would like to see. I know that they've talked a lot about. I asked Cap Kapilovic a question last week about short yardage. How he feels about that, and that's one of the things that they were really disappointed about last year. As good as that offense performed, it was not very good in short yardage. That's what they felt like. That's what they did a lot of homework on in the off season to see how they can improve. I would like to see maybe schematically what they and they're probably not going to show the schematic. Exactly the stuff on schematics that you'd like to see, but I want to see, what the focus, what the emphasis, what they're working on short yardage, and I kind of like to see how those running backs fit together. And I'm not sure if we're going to get a very clear picture from the spring scrimmage just because of personnel issues. That it's kind of similar. The offensive line is similar to what we had at linebacker last year, or maybe also a defensive back, where there's some pieces that are going to be there, but you're probably not going to see the real deal until fall camp, and that's kind of disappointing to me. But aside from that, I want to see guys like Amir Speed. I kind of want to see what some of those what the guys that came in were transfers from last year, how they look. I'd like to see tight end as a position I'll be watching very closely because I think they finally get bodies there, and I want to see how all those guys fit together. And then one of the things that's always interesting. It's guys like Keon Coleman, Montorie Foster. Those guys that got a little taste of playing time last year looked pretty good at times. Malik Carr's another one. What are those guys going to look like? Are they going to use this spring as a springboard moving forward and really challenge for starting jobs? Those are kind of some of the things I'll be looking for.
Yeah, there's competition at wide receiver, competition at running back. Last year for the spring scrimmage, we didn't know what Kenneth Walker was going to become. But in the spring scrimmage, what did he have? 3 or 4 carries, I think. We were eager to see what he would look like, and he had a couple of carries.
He looked different. I mean, he had a few carries, but he looked different than the other tailbacks in terms of from what I saw in terms of his ability to get outside. That kind of but we didn't see enough to be like, hey, this guy's going to be all Big Ten.
And
I felt really good about what he was doing in the spring game, but tailback you really couldn't tell much at all from that spring scrimmage, especially if you watched it on TV.
They were protecting him. The coaches knew what Kenneth Walker had. They had an idea what he was all about, and they did not want to, expose him to any dings or anything like that. So 3 or 4 snaps got him out of there. So I will be interested to see what they do with, Jalen Berger, the transfer from Wisconsin. Do they hold him in the same esteem? Jarek Broussard, the transfer from Colorado, is not yet on campus. So what you've got at running back is you've got some established players that are competing with one another. I mean, Jordan Simmons led the team in rushing 2 years ago, was kind of second string last year, had some injuries, banged up a little bit later in the year. Elijah Collins, everybody is aware of his injury history and what he did in 2019, over 900 yards rushing. And then, Collins had an injury, lower body injury against Youngstown State. Missed 5 or 6 games or whatever it was, inched his way back into the playing group, and he became the number 2 running back for the Penn State game ahead of Jordan Simmons. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Okay, he's ahead of Jordan Simmons. But then in the bowl game, Kenneth Walker turned pro, moved on, opted out, And Jordan Simmons moved back ahead of Elijah Collins, and Jordan Simmons became the starter in the Peach Bowl. Meanwhile, Harold Joyner turned in a couple of good plays against Penn State and against Pittsburgh, a very good Pittsburgh defense that Michigan State had all kinds of trouble running the ball against. But Harold Joyner had one or two, I don't want to say electric plays, but one or two he popped on a couple of plays, even if it was just a run for a gain of 6 yards against that defense. But Joyner all of a sudden showed something. So Simmons moved back ahead of Collins, and I asked William Piegler about that right after he took that job and moved on to Florida, what went on with Simmons, in the Collins-Simmons thing late in the year. And he said that Simmons was injured, and that's why Collins was ahead of him for the Penn State game. So it wasn't necessarily winning that job on equal footing. So now you've got a new running backs coach, Ephraim Reed. Will he see things differently than William Piegler did? We don't know. But the green-white game, Elijah Collins has been the feature back in the past in 2019. Jordan Simmons was somewhat of the feature back in 2020. And, do they get a lot of work in this game as they compete to become the guy that's going to, compete with Broussard when he arrives? The other one is Davion Prim. And I talked about him earlier in this podcast. I'm really surprised by him because I mentioned earlier, and I'm not going to go over it again, but I didn't think he was a pick to click in this recruiting class, and I was not surprised that he didn't really get on the field or dress last fall. I'm shocked that more than one or two coaches have talked about him being a guy that's a riser, and I've heard from some other people and things that we've seen. It is legit. Davion Prim has been they've been dabbling with second string reps for him in some of the scrimmage time. Will he be a second string rep guy in the spring game? If they get any kind of blocking, I wouldn't be surprised if Prim becomes the ball carrying story in the spring game. That doesn't necessarily translate to big doings in the fall, but it wouldn't shock me if Prim's coming of age spring continues, and all that does is create more competition in the running back room and create more questions. Davion Prim, Paul.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Prim is, I think the coaching staff looked at a guy like Harold Joyner, he's 6'4", 215. Maybe he can be a short yardage guy, but he's not. And I just wonder with Davion Prim, if he's the bigger body type dude, if he can fill a nice role for a short yardage guy, and then kind of develop over there. I think that he, to me, makes the most sense. You want to see what Jalen Berger can do. You want to showcase him a little bit, a la what they did with K9 last year. And you want to give those other guys their chance as well. But when you've got a patchwork offensive line, you don't need to be showing guys that you kind of already know what they can do or know what they are, or kind of have an idea of what their roles might be. You don't need those guys get hit in the backfield by a defensive line that's pretty good up the middle, and and a lot more experience coming back. So I want to see Davion Prim, but I wonder if he's part of the solution in the short yardage type situation moving forward, and that's something I guess we'll really find out more about in the next fall.
Sure, and Donovan Eaglin is a guy that looked pretty good in the spring scrimmage last year and improved and impressed some people that watched him in practice last year. But I don't know if he's been on the field a lot this year for the scrimmaging thus far. A solid guy, but I'm not sure where he lands on. I think he has ability to play somewhere. And you've got all these scholarship running backs. I got to believe that in this age of the portal, they'll be honest with some of these guys and say, hey, if you want to play, it might be best for you to seek another program. We love you, but it's pretty crowded here. I'm kind of expecting one or two or three of these guys to hit the portal after spring is over. I don't know that for a fact, but that's just the climate of college football, and it looks like Michigan State at the running back position would be a candidate for that type of attrition. On that offensive line, who's going to be blocking for them? Jarrett Horst is back at left tackle. He's been in and out a little bit this spring. It's my understanding Brandon Baldwin, junior college transfer, has been getting a lot of reps over there at left tackle, and I think it's a possibility we might see him play a lot of left tackle, maybe even with the ones in this game. I'm not sure what that will look like, but a young guy that has some athletic ability, some feet, and a frame. I'll be eager to see what he looks like because I've never seen him play. Now, his last year at junior college was canceled because of COVID, so he's kind of a Sasquatch. There's not much film on this guy, and Brandon Baldwin, my understanding, is making some traction there at left tackle. I'm eager to see what that looks like as far as Horst goes. I don't know how much you can rely on him. Last year what happened, and this and that, and he's got some ability. He's a proven player. He was solid when he was in there last year, and they need him. But, I've not heard that from coaches that they don't know if they can rely on him. I'm just saying from the outside looking in, that's a question mark. So in the meantime, the offensive lineman, the offensive tackle, Spencer Brown came in that bowl game because Horst was gone and Jarvis was injured. Spencer Brown had a plug and play, his first start, his first real quality extended playing time, and he was solid against a very good Pittsburgh pass rush. So now Spencer Brown, does he play a little bit of left tackle? I don't know. Ethan Boyd, the redshirt freshman out of East Lansing. These are all big frame athletic guys. So left tackle, it could get a little messy there in terms of trying to establish the run, but those are important people there on that offensive line. Now, Matt Carrick, he's still recovering from his knee injury. Duplain has been out a little bit this year. Vandemark was looking good, true freshman. He's banged up a little bit. I think Kapilovic said that earlier this week. Samac is in there. Dallas Fincher's in there. Kevin Wigginton's been in there. So a lot of new names, and they're getting some important work that's going to help in the future, but it might not look real tidy in the run game on Saturday, Paul.
Yeah, and I've got a feeling that Jarrett Horst isn't going to play in that game. I think that was kind of that. I think that was the kind of feeling from. They will. I think you'll see a lot. You'll see a lot of Ethan Boyd in Baldwin, as you mentioned. Baldwin is interesting because he's got the frame, he's got the size, but. I don't even remember him much, like being a high school player. And I know, I know his background is more basketball than football. So this is kind of a transition for him, and it's going to be good experience. I think all those guys, Ethan Boyd, Kevin Wigginton, Gino Vandermark before he got dinged up, but all those guys in that redshirt freshman class, huge spring just to get all those reps. Mm-hmm. I asked Spencer Brown when we had him for interviews, I asked him, do those guys remind you of where you were at last year? Because if you remember Spencer Brown, the first time we started hearing that name, was last year. Kapilovic said a couple of things about, hey, he's doing some things that surprised me, and I think that was the first step for him, because before last spring, he seemed like he was one of those guys that was kind of on the way, kind of floating in no man's land, mm-hmm. and he benefited from all the reps that he got last spring, and he just kind of steadily built on them. And I think those other guys in the redshirt freshman class, like Wigginton, Vandemark, who's probably not going to play, but Ethan Boyd, Baldwin, those guys, this is big for them, and they've gotten a ton of reps. And Ethan Boyd and Baldwin, those are the two guys that I really want to see. But the other guy I think we shouldn't sleep on is Dallas Fincher, because the knock on him coming in 3 years ago, I think he's a redshirt sophomore now. But 3 years ago when he came into the program, it was always he's pretty athletic. He can play multiple positions on the interior line, but is he ever going to be able to put the weight on? And we've seen that with some other guys over the years, Matt Allen being one of them, some of the other guys that have played center in the past. But this spring, Fincher's able to, he's up to 300 pounds. He's been able to keep that weight on, and this is a really big spring for him. I'm interested to see what he can do. If he can situate himself, because it's kind of moving time for him. He's either got to keep moving up, or he's got to, otherwise he's just kind of going to fade. So I want to see what Dallas Fincher can do. But those redshirt freshmen, they've gotten a lot of reps this spring. I think they're going to grow from it. And there's some good frames in there, mm-hmm. but can they do what Spencer Brown did last year? Kind of steadily build and then take advantage of their opportunity. And I can't remember the last time an offensive lineman took care of his opportunity the way Spencer Brown did. That was huge for Michigan State, the way he came on and performed well against a very good Pittsburgh defensive line in a bowl game. And I mean, it usually doesn't play out like that. He said during interviews a couple of weeks ago, he said it was like a movie, and it really was, because usually it's a bad movie mm-hmm. when guys get pressed into duty. And then you're like, well, can this guy learn from the mistakes he made in the bowl game? Well, he may make some mistakes in the bowl game, but he made a lot more plays. And now all of a sudden, Michigan State situated pretty well at right tackle. And, can Spencer Brown become a real impact player?
Yeah, they late in that game, I mean, Pittsburgh moved Baldonado over there, their best pass rusher. A second team All-ACC guy, and Brown was fine against him. I mean, the player development that Michigan State has established with Spencer Brown has been impressive. First of all, Spencer Brown is the talented young man who's put forth the effort, the work to get it done. But that's a guy in high school, he had some length to him, had some straight line athleticism, but his mobility, I was like, I didn't agree with with Rivals.com
I agree with
ranking.
you.
I didn't agree with Rivals.com having him as a 4-star recruit. I thought he was a 3-star project. So I'm not, we're not people at SpartanMag.com that are going to tell you that every recruit is great and every recruit is going to be the next savior. There's a lot of that going on for various programs, but we try to have some credibility in what we see, and we're right sometimes, we're wrong sometimes. That's a guy that I don't think was a 4-star recruit. I think he was a 3-star project, and last year as a sophomore in the bowl game, he played like a guy that might end up being a 4-star guy, a 4-star college career guy. And player development has had a lot to do with that. He's been getting some good coaching. He's been working at it. And, he might even get a look over there at left tackle. So if Horst, I agree with you, Horst, we might not see him. So if you have Baldwin and Ethan Brown, all of a sudden you've got a shortage of offensive tackles for a second-string offensive line. As you mentioned, Michigan State moved some walk-on defensive tackles over to the offensive line just to fill out 2 units on the offensive line. They moved Brunning and LaFave over there. And those 2 defensive tackles are actually pretty solid. Michigan State just happens to be really strong at defensive tackle, so those guys never got on the field last year. But those guys are solid. Moving to the offensive line, it's probably not going to be real pretty, but that's what they had to do to get 2 full units. But that's okay for interior guys, but I don't know what they're going to do for second-string offensive tackles if Horst doesn't play. There was some talk that, Kapilovic was talking about someone being athletic enough to even try some tackle. Was he talking about Samac or Fincher?
Yeah, Samac. Yeah, he's talking about Samac. And you know what? Yeah, that's something. That's the guy that you rep up and you get him ready for that in case you have an emergency during the season.
Yeah.
We saw the same. We saw the same thing with. In the past, we've seen a center get emergency action at left tackle. You don't do that. I don't think you do that in the spring. He's playing enough reps as a leader of that line. You're not going to throw him out there, at left tackle in a spring game. I think they're going to. It's probably going to be Boyd and Baldwin.
That's what the ones.
They're going to have to roll with it.
That's what the ones. But who's the offensive tackles when they have to go to second-string offensive line?
Yeah.
Samac. If Fincher,
I don't know if you do it.
And in order to have a practice, they're going to need someone to play some tackle.
Well,
we'll find out.
I get it, and I think they're going to limit some of that stuff. I think they're going to be mixed. Maybe they'll mix some ones with the twos. I don't know.
Yeah, and as far as there is a drastic lack of depth there on the offensive line, but. During the summer, they'll have 6 new guys coming in, 4 new freshmen coming in, and then 1 transfer portal, Brian Green, coming in from Washington State, and they're expecting another 1 from the portal. So there'll be 6 new faces added to this. In the meantime, these offensive linemen are getting valuable repetitions, valuable work, making mistakes, getting corrected, and it's a real good boot camp for some of these guys like Wigginton, Fincher, and it was Vandermark before he got hurt, but also Boyd and Baldwin. As far we've been mentioning Vandermark's injury. It didn't sound too serious to me. Just kind of dinged and bumped and probably not available. Is that way? They don't really reveal what the injuries are, but I don't think it was.
No. So what the thing that I got, and I think what was intimated by Kapilovic was if this was game week, if this was during the season, there are a couple guys that they could get back.
Okay.
But they're not going to do that to these guys. It being the spring, because they don't want to risk further injury, and they want these guys to heal and have good off season. So I don't think there's nothing really big deal. And I think Kapilovic intimated as well that hey, they're going to be they don't have as much depth obviously as they had last year on the offensive line, but they're going to have the numbers that they need. Once guys like Duplain get back and Vandermark's back and Carrick. It's not a huge deal, but for a practice it is. As you mentioned, when you've got 5 offensive linemen and 2 converted defensive linemen, it's a problem, and that's one of the deals where I think the portal has hurt Michigan State, because you had a lot of second stringer, third stringer types, that kind of left the program, whether it's Ohamba or Jacob Asaya. Mm-hmm. Those are guys that could have been playing in this game, but obviously you're not going to stick around the program just to play in a spring game.
Right.
So.
Right. And before we let you go, also, at quarterback, I will be interested to see who trots out there as the number 2 quarterback. I assume it's going to be Noah Kim, a holdover from the D'Antonio.
Yeah, I think so.
From the D'Antonio years.
Everything.
He's doing well.
Yeah, everything I've heard, like whether it's Jay Johnson has said really good things about him, and then also Mel Tucker talking about his arm talent. When a head coach raves about a guy's arm talent, that's about as good an endorsement as you can get. And I'm interested to see. I thought he threw a really, really good ball last year. I thought he was accurate. The only thing that maybe doesn't look the part is, he's not as put together as some of these other quarterbacks. But I think right now, if you're looking at who's going to be the backup quarterback, I think he's clearly the number 2 right now. And with the younger guys kind of looking to play catch up. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders, throws a good ball, knows the offense, and there is a trust factor there with Noah Kim that I think that the other guys behind him have to play catch up.
And I know that Jay Johnson said that Hampton Fay has improved 300%, and that's not just coach speak, from what I understand, Paul. Hamp Fay, I understand, is doing some good things, and although Noah Kim seems by all rights to be ahead of him at this point, that can flip in a matter of a few practices, and a public scrimmage is an opportunity for Hampton Fay to show a few things. He's coming along well and doing some good things. Caton Hauser, mid-year, all kinds of talent there also. But this will be an important primary for that second string job, and Hampton Fay still knocking on the door as well as Kim is playing. So that's going to be some real world competition going on with those 2 second string quarterbacks trying to impress to get that job. Now, Paul, we're also going to be watching Chris Bogle, the transfer from Florida, defensive end. They need some help at defensive end. With Drew Beasley graduating, Jacob Panishik graduating, they need some production out there. Pietrowski's coming back, but they go out and they get Chris Bogle, athletic guy coming in from Florida. He's coming in as a free agent to do some work. And we need, I think, as observers, we'll be interested to see if he shows signs of that. I'm also going to be interested in Tank Brown, a guy that's shown some signs of life, I hear, this spring. Those defensive ends. And Brandon Wright. Brandon Wright finished last season with some punch. And Brandon Wright is a guy that has a chance to be one of the more improved players on this team. The door is open for job opportunities at defensive end. Of those 4 guys, what are you kind of expecting to see before we actually go out and see it? What are your thoughts? What are your forecasts there, defensive end?
Well, I think Brandon Wright's going to be interesting because I think this is the kind of environment where he can really show out. You've got pass rush situations. You've got you kind of got a leg-weary, tired, undermanned offensive line. So Brandon Wright's a pass rush guy. He did some good things at the end of last year. I'm going to be interested to see, where they think he's at in terms of playing the run. But I think he's got all kinds of talent. Tank Brown, I think, is a guy that now it's a chance for him to make a move. He has to make a move. I think it's pretty imperative for him to make a move. Pietrowski is a guy that we're going to always overlook. I've got a feeling he's going to be like, that Marcus Rush type of guy. But the fact that you've got a brand new defensive line coach and you've got a pass rush coach raving about a guy, he's our guy, he's my favorite player. I believe that's what the defensive line coach said when we had him at interviews. That's not, based on watching the defensive line practice, Marco Coleman's not a guy that throws out a lot of plaudits. He's a guy that pushes a lot of buttons. He's a guy that rants and raves. He's a guy that really gets after it. So for him to come out and say that Jeff Pietrowski's his guy, that means a lot to me. So I think that's a guy that we shouldn't overlook. But you've got to have other guys step up. I would really, there's a Chris Bogle. I'm not sure what to think about him. But here's a chance for him to kind of state his case. And I think this is one of those things where it's valuable to have a guy in for spring. Now, last year, Simeon Barrow on the interior defensive line, he really had a heck of a spring game, and that really kind of set it up and was really kind of evidence that, hey, this thing is moving in the right direction. At linebacker, Cal Halliday, same thing. You're kind of like, oh, Cal Halliday, who's this guy? Well, he's getting advantage of all these reps. Well, what he did in the spring transferred. What Simeon Barrow did in the spring transferred over to the season. This is a chance for Bogle, maybe to set the tone and do the same thing. But there's other guys out there that I don't know what they're capable of doing, but it's a good starting point. But the other guy I'm interested to see is interior defensive lineman. I know it's a deep interior defensive line, but Derek Harmon's a guy that's got quick feet for being a 330-pounder. Saw that again in drill work a week and a half ago. I was really impressed with that. And, I think he's got a chance. I think he's got a chance to make a move. And it's going to, with the interior line being as good as it is, it's going to be, and he moving up, what's that going to do to a guy like Jalen Hunt? Jalen Hunt's a guy that's got all kinds of talent, hasn't put it together. It's on him to do that. Otherwise, he's going to get surpassed, and Derek Harmon's a good candidate to surpass him. It's going to be interesting to see what some guys, which guys take advantage of their opportunity. I'll be looking, obviously you want to see Chris Bogle because we haven't seen him before. This is a chance for him to state his case, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Jeff Pietrowski can do. A quiet 5 sacks. If they didn't have him, and I think maybe he wore down and got dinged up a little bit and beat up as, while he's playing as many snaps as he did, but he did a really nice job filling in for Beasley. Mm-hmm. And I want to see him I want to see him put that next layer on. I think he's exciting. I think he's excited, and some of his coaches believe in him. But what's he going to do? What's Chris Bogle going to do? And is Michael Fletcher? Does he have a pulse? This is I talked about Jalen Hunt in the interior defensive line. He's got to make a move. Michael Fletcher, his time is now. If he's not going to make a move, then it's not going to happen. So that's kind of what spring is to me in a lot of ways. It's a chance to see new guys, see where young guys are kind of moving up. And what they can do, kind of using spring as kind of a stepping stone for the next level. But there's other guys like Fletcher that's got to move now, otherwise he's never going to. Same thing with Jalen Hunt.
You're right, and I wouldn't hold my breath on those two, and I'm sure you're not either. Jalen Hunt, no. He really impressed Mark D'Antonio earlier in Hunt's career, but he's kind of hit a ceiling and kind of flatlined, and I'm not hearing a lot of stock buy forecasts with him. So. We'll see if he gets on the field Saturday, and he needs to have a good spring. And I was talking to Tucker before spring practice began, and he said this is a big spring for Fletcher. He's got to do something. I always said he never really had that ability to turn the corner and be that type of edge rusher. I think he's got some straight line speed and some wiry strength. Whether that fits in this scheme, time's running out, like you said. What were you about to say?
Yeah, I mean, there's other guys too, but you look at a Jalen Hunt, and I don't know if he's hit his ceiling. I just don't think he's found the gear that he needs to find to be successful at the college level. Yeah. I mean, to be a productive college defensive lineman, you have got to be mean, nasty, and play through injury. You look at Simeon Barrow and Jacob Slade. Those guys are playing with clubs on their hands the entire year. I mean, playing through pain, playing through injury. If you can't do that, you're not going to be on the field. And, it's kind of unfair, not to Jalen Hunt, but it's unfair to other guys like Maverick Hansen, who's going out there and grinding, that everyone keeps on asking about, hey, what about Jalen Hunt? But Maverick Hansen has surpassed him. And I don't see him leapfrogging. I don't see Jalen Hunt leapfrogging Maverick Hansen, and credit to Maverick Hansen for doing that. It's a position of incremental improvement. Mm-hmm. If you're not tough enough, and if you don't get better, a little bit better every practice, you're not going to hang on the interior defensive line. It's a man's position. And if you can't do it, you can't do it.
Mm-hmm. And you made a great point about Simeon Barrow. We had no clue about him. Hadn't heard much about him at all in the spring. And then in that spring game, he would have been the defensive MVP of the day for those that were watching closely, like you and I were. A lot of people say, it's a spring game. They're not going to show anything. You're not going to see anything. That's bull crap. If you watch closely enough, and Simeon Barrow ended up being an impact player in 2022, the first sign of it was in the spring scrimmage. And we can go back to other guys like Jeremy Langford or Tyler Hoover, guys that have made a breakthrough sometimes later in their career. It shows up in the spring game. Now, there'll be other guys that they protect that don't get on the field. But if you watch closely enough, there are some clues out there. The linebacker position, want to check out Aaron Brule, the transfer from Mississippi State. And also Nateote, we'll see what he's looking like. Cal Halliday started last year, became an impact player. Jacoby Windman, the transfer from UNLV, is playing to some real good reviews. That's four linebackers for those two positions. We're not hearing anything about Quavaris Crouch, and I don't think we're going to see him. So those are the four. That's an entire two deep at the linebacker position, and I'm expecting all four of those guys to play at linebacker this year. Before I let you go, any of those linebackers interest you?
Well, I think Aaron Brule and Windman. It's nice to have the competition level in there, and I think both those guys care about football, and they want to be there, and they're football players. I'm not sure. I'll say this about Quavaris Crouch. All airport team, all combine team, has got a ton of athleticism. But I go back to last season, and he had some loud moments, and he had a lot of mistakes as well. But you take away you take out of the program a guy like Noah Harvey, Michigan State doesn't win some of the biggest games that they won last year. And everyone wants to talk about, you got to have athletes like Quavaris Crouch, and I don't disagree with that. But you got to have football players, and I think in Windman and Brule, they brought in football players, not just great athletes with big upside. They brought in 2 football players that want to play well and want to play the right way, and that's the way it has to be. Everyone's got to be on the same page.
All right, and one thing about Brule, I was watching some like all-access stuff with him last year at Mississippi State, and just showing him in the preseason and so forth. Showing him t-shirt, shorts, workouts and stuff. And he struck me as a guy that kind of maybe had 5 or 10 extra pounds of weight, unnecessary weight. I hear he's looking pretty jacked up now. I'm interested to see what an entire half season with Novak and Michigan State's strength conditioning and nutrition program. I'll be eager to see if Brule can go from being a pretty good player at Mississippi State, who was supposed to be the face of their defense, that just kind of was okay last fall. Can this strength and nutrition program turn him into a better version of Aaron Brule, which is a former 4-star recruit? That's something to keep an eye on. I'll be looking to see what he looks like in the spring scrimmage coming up on Saturday. Paul, I know you got other things you need to do tonight. I appreciate all the time you spent with us. Anything else you want to add before you go?
Yeah, just one thing on Brule. I had the chance to talk to his high school coach back in Louisiana, and he felt like Aaron Brule was playing way too heavy last year.
Who said that?
He felt like
I'm sorry.
Brule's high school coach.
Okay, yeah.
After he committed to Michigan State, I talked to some of his high school people, and that's a big time high school program.
Yeah.
They sent a lot of guys to the NFL, and he felt like Brule was playing a little bit too heavy, and that it wasn't on him. I think that was by design. They wanted, he was light and speedy, and he put up really good pass rush numbers I believe as a sophomore, and they were kind of trying to do, they were trying to kind of take that next level with him, get him a little bit bigger, but they balked him up too much, and I think he lost some of the speed, and it didn't work out. Now his coach didn't say all the things like they balked him up, but the kind of thing that I felt just from talking to the coach, it was the insinuation that he was playing heavier than he should have been last year. That's my takeaway from that conversation. I think it's pretty obvious, going back, seeing what he looks like now in comparison to what he looked like last year. I think it's pretty obvious that he's in a better place.
Yeah, all right, Paul. Great points. I appreciate your contributions and insight. We will have you back at SpartanMag.com next week as we cover some more practices and press conferences as we count down the days toward the spring scrimmage on April 16th, I think it is, Saturday over at Spartan Stadium. We'll see you over there, Paul. See you in East Lansing in a few days. All right, Paul?
All right, take care, Jim.
There he goes, Paul Koenig. Thanks a lot, Paul. Associate editor, SpartanMag.com. We appreciate all of his hard work for sure and his insight and so forth. Appreciate all the people that have made what do we have here? What's going on? There we go. That have made comments over here in the comments area. I'll field some questions over there. And as we move on here with Spartan Mag Live, make sure to give us a thumbs up and also subscribe to the channel here. Let's look to see over here in the chat area. MJ says, comp for president. I don't think I could handle that. Thank you, though. Brian V says, sup. Eric M says, hey, comp, happy Friday from Roswell, Georgia. MJ says, hello from Hong Kong. Mr. Bowman says, hello, comp. So you got MJ on the wing. You got Brian V around the point. Eric M's your shooting guard. Mr. Bowman, he's the big man down low. And Mark Carrier is a stretch 4. That's your starting 5 tonight. Adam Fika says, go green, like the stream. Rob South says, what's up, fellas? MG says, please, Big Movie, call in. I talked to Big Movie this week. We had some good conversations about a lot of things. I did not ask him to come on this week, but maybe after the green-white game, we'll have to get some of his observations for sure. But I'll tell him that you said hello. Terrence says, hello, happy Friday. It is different for us to be doing this on Friday. Usually we're earlier in the week on this. Doing this on Friday shows that I have no life, but that's all right. I had a life earlier in my life, but Friday, earlier this week had other things going on and couldn't get it going. I don't want to elaborate on that, but anyway, James Bannon, Sterling Heights in the house. Hayden Roberts, go green from Wyoming, Michigan. Rob Moffitt says, hi, comp, checking in from West Bloomfield. No Iris says, comp, go green, hello. Jim Ashman says, go green from Lansing. Matt Latham says, go green. Matt Latham presides over our Michigan State hockey message board at SpartanMag.com. Tough times for Michigan State hockey, that's for sure. But it is Frozen Four weekend. There was some great hockey on last night. Big Ten had Minnesota and Michigan State in the Michigan and Minnesota in the semifinals. They both lost. Big Ten looked strong to get 2 in the Frozen Four, but nobody in the title game. I could go on a little bit more about the Big Ten. I was talking to Graham Couch about this. Graham Couch, really good reporter and columnist for the Lansing State Journal. He's been around town for a long time, a real astute observer on everything. And he and I agree that the Big Ten, the forming of Big Ten hockey, although it's made for some really good, interesting, competitive hockey weekends, December, January, and February, every single weekend. That's been good in terms of regular season entertainment, but it's hurt some programs, including Michigan State. And I've said this before. NCAA tournament this year, who made it? Notre Dame made it. Notre Dame, Michigan, Minnesota. So 3. When you're talking about big school powers, I'd like to go back to look at the NCAA tournament back when it was, as long as it's been 16 teams, back before the Big Ten hockey was formed. How frequently would you see 4 Big Ten teams, quote-unquote Big Ten teams, make it, including Notre Dame? How many years would you see Minnesota, Wisconsin, Notre Dame, and Michigan? Or Michigan, Michigan State, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, or Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio State, Michigan State, and Michigan. Sometimes you probably get all of those. You might get all 5 of those. But the way it's configured right now, there's no way that 5 of the 7 Big Ten teams are getting in. So it's made for some competitive weekends, and the teams with the very best talent, Minnesota and Michigan, they can still get in. But some of those mid-level Big Ten team, like Ohio State, doesn't get in. Penn State was good last year, took a drop off this year. I've said it 3 times now. It's good for if you're going to buy a hockey ticket in January 14th, you'd much rather watch Michigan State versus Wisconsin, Michigan State versus Penn State, as opposed to Michigan State versus Kent State or Michigan State versus Ferris State. No ill respect to Ferris State and those, but back in the old CCHA days, you'd see a lot of those low majors, so to speak, filling up the schedule. Schedule's better now, but it's an overall negative, I think, for Michigan State hockey, the Big Ten thing. It's good for Big Ten Network. We see some of those games. Not as many games as maybe we thought we were going to see 6 or 7 years ago. The ratings are just okay. I think volleyball gets better ratings on Big Ten Network. But it's a hard road to get in there. It was good for the Big Ten to get 2 in the Frozen Four. Anyway, that's my little aside about Matthew Latham. Glad to see him here. Gordon Sonona says hello. It's good to see Gordon. I know he's a subscriber to SpartanMag.com. Good to have him in here. Mr. Bowman says hello from Harper Woods. Robert Bealby, Spartans Rule. Aaron May says, Comp, who do you think is the top 4 wide receiver of Michigan State? Who do you think is the top 4 wide receivers from Michigan State? I think you mean who are the top 4 wide receivers. Go over to SpartanMag.com. We dropped a story today. It's a free story. Go on over there if you're not a subscriber. About the wide receivers. We call it a developmental update, wide receivers, quotes from Courtney Hawkins. You also have quotes from Courtney Hawkins here on the YouTube channel. You can watch the press conference from earlier this week. And we talk about that. Jayden Reed obviously is number 1. Trey Mosley is an established number 2 now. He was a number 3 back when Naylor was around. So you've got, I think Keon Coleman's on the rise, had 7 catches last year. I said earlier in the podcast tonight, I think he's capable of 40 or more this year. Montori Foster had 3 starts, I think, last year, while Jalen Naylor was injured. Good, solid player, had the 54-yard touchdown against Maryland on a flea flicker. Foster's pretty good. I think Coleman could surpass him this year. So I think those are the likely 4. Jeremy Bernard is the real deal. I know he's just a freshman, but he's impressing. He's just a mid-year enrollee. He should be in high school right now. I don't know how long it's going to take him to get into that rotation, but at some point, he's going to make an impact. Christian Fitzpatrick got on the field last year, 117 snaps, I think. 6'4", transfer from Louisville. Good blocker. A lot of times when he was on the field, it telegraphed a little bit that it was going to be a running play, though. Because if you wanted to get Naylor or Reed, get him a blow, get him off the field, Fitzpatrick in there, probably a run play. Fitzpatrick has the ability to do some things as a receiver also, but it's a competitive room. You're asking the top 4. I mentioned, Terry Lockett's in there. Am I forgetting somebody? I might even be forgetting somebody. But I think Coleman becomes number 3. I think he's shown some poise and some maturity that I wasn't sure he would have as a freshman. Quite frankly, the people we talked to in Louisiana when he was coming to Michigan State kind of predicted that he'd end up at the portal and be high maintenance, and I mentioned that on this show last year. Man, he really conducted himself and handled his business really well going to basketball and keeping tabs with football, and impressed the coaches how he went right back to the football field right after Michigan State lost to Duke and hit the ground running, no rust. And you watched him in the press conference this week. We had the film here at the YouTube channel, posted it over at SpartanMag.com, showing some maturity. And he's doing it in that 6'4" ultra athletic frame. So it's those 3 and then Foster. I think those are your 4. With Fitzpatrick knocking on the door, Bernard knocking on the door. That's what I think. Adam Fika says Coach Johnson described the tight end position as the MVP of the offense, so I'm hoping to see more out of that group. Connor Hayward was a surprise at the tight end position this year, in my opinion. Some of you were not surprised, but he was a plus player at that position. He really helped. He had a big impact on Michigan State going 11-2, Connor Hayward. So now Michigan State goes to the portal, and they bring in Daniel Barker out of Illinois. Very productive tight end. He'll be a welcomed addition. Malik Carr, all kinds of ability, needs to show he can block. What do we have here? Let's go back to the questions that were posted over the Underground Bunker message board earlier today. Let's field those mailbag style. Question number 3, Byron from Forest Hills, Michigan. That's located just outside of Grand Rapids. He says, who do you see as the favorite to win the starting role at running back? I will reserve the ability to change this prediction next week, next month, in the months ahead, and into August. But right now, the unknown is undefeated. I'm going to go with Jarek Broussard. What was he? Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year 2 years ago. It was pretty good this year at Colorado. He's not on campus yet, but I think he wins the starting job. This spring, Jalen Berger's been in and out. We'll see what he looks like in the green-white game. Jordan Simmons moved ahead of Elijah Collins for the bowl game. Those guys are competing. You know, it's competitive in there. And like I said when I was talking to Paul Konendijk, Simmons was a little bit ahead of Elijah Collins most of last year, even though Elijah Collins had some injuries and Simmons had some injuries later in the season. That was with William Piegler. Does Ephraim Reed see things differently? We'll have to wait and see. But I'm going to go with Broussard. I know they brought in K9 last year and Harold Joyner, and they don't bring those guys in to sit, but sometimes they end up sitting. Harold Joyner didn't play as much as they thought. Walker ends up being Heisman Trophy candidate. Anthony Russo comes in, transfers from Temple, sits the whole year. So there's no guarantees. So with Berger and Broussard, no guarantees that they're going to go 1-2. But I think one of them will be the starter. I'm thinking Broussard. Berger, did Berger lead Wisconsin in rushing during the COVID year? I mean, he was a 4-star coming out of New Jersey, highly acclaimed, had a big role with the Badgers. But you watch his film, and he's okay. I'm not sure about the make you miss. You know, he's got some straight lines. So if the blocking's good, he's got some force behind him. But I just think Broussard's got that vision, make you miss a little bit more. Question number 4, Mike from West Palm Beach, Florida says, how about a loaded macro question out there quickly? What team is closer to winning a national championship? Michigan State's basketball team or football team? He says, no ambiguities. Please pick one. Laughing out loud. Thanks, Jim. Closest to winning a national championship, basketball or football, Michigan State? The answer is basketball. I know basketball didn't finish in the top 10 like football did this year. I know basketball is a little bit schizophrenic these days, a little bit. But I'll say basketball simply because in basketball, by the nature of the beast, every year these days in college basketball, there's anywhere from 10 to 15 teams that can win a national championship, in my estimation. It's just a little more random. You look at North Carolina, they almost won the national championship. In the middle of February, they were on the bubble. They were like in danger of not making the tournament. They go from in danger of not making the tournament and losing by 20 to Wake Forest to being up 15 in the national championship game. So there's just more teams with a chance to do it. Kansas was the number 1 seed, but they were kind of like an off-the-radar number 1 seed, if there's ever been one. Off the radar because they were blown out by Kentucky in late January, and everybody left Kansas for dead. McCormick was kind of schizo all year at center, but I mean, Remy Martin came on strong. Abaji was great all year, but the rest of it, it gelled when they gelled. Duke gelled late. Duke played poorly against North Carolina in the last game of the regular season, blown out by Virginia Tech in the ACC championship game. Kind of got their attention together. They were down by Michigan State, 5 with 5 minutes to go, and Duke went down to the wire against North Carolina. Duke almost won the national championship this year. Michigan State almost beat Duke. So even though Michigan State didn't finish near the top 10 like the football team did, then you look at football. Yeah, Michigan State number 10 in the country, finishing it up 11-2, nice record. But you saw what happened when they got on the field against Ohio State. You saw what happened when Michigan got on the field against Georgia, when Michigan State's been on the field against Alabama in the college football playoff. The gap between the top 2 or 3 teams in college football compared to 5 to 15, that gap is mammoth. And Michigan State is not close to that gap in football. Got great respect for what they're trying to do and where they look to be, like where they're going. But Michigan wasn't close to that gap. Michigan State was not close to Ohio State this year, like I said. Michigan State was close to Duke. I know transitive property doesn't work in athletics, but the main point, there's a broader spectrum of 10, 15 teams that can win a national championship in college basketball every year. It's more random. It can be done. For that reason, because of the landscape of the sport, the answer is Michigan State basketball is closer to win a national championship than Michigan State football. Question number 5, Spartan Fan 81 from Orange County, California says, who are you hearing that's impressing in spring practice? Who's impressing in spring practice? Peyton Thorne, of course. Jaden Reed, of course. Talked about Davion Prim doing some good things at running back. Looking forward to seeing him in the spring scrimmage. Spencer Brown at offensive tackle. Came out of nowhere to play some solid football. Pressed into duty in the bowl game. Now he's building on that. And he's not ready for the Hall of Fame or anything, but maybe he can become a functional, reliable starter at offensive tackle, which is so valuable, and wouldn't have really thought that was in his future 12 months ago. Good for him. Wide receiver mid-year enrollee, Jeremy Bernard, coming in from Nevada, formerly a Washington Husky commitment, a late addition to the recruiting class at the 11th hour. That's a big 4-star addition to the incoming recruiting class. He's making an impact on offense. He's got a lot to learn with the speed and physicality of the game. That's what Courtney Hawkins says, but he's got ability. Nice guy to have in the talent pool. Keon Coleman, still just a freshman. Impressive. Jacoby Windman, the transfer from UNLV at linebacker, hearing good things about him. I'll be eager to see who trots out there as the first-string linebackers. I'm kind of expecting it to be Halliday and Windman. And behind them, I'm thinking Nateote and Aaron Brule. That's what I'm expecting. We'll have to wait and see. Who else is impressive? Amir Speed, the transfer, 6'3" corner from Georgia. I'll be eager this weekend to see Brule and Chris Bogle at defensive end, the transfer from Florida. And also the safety situation, Angelo Gross. Angelo Gross last year at safety, when they had that open practice that the public was allowed to go watch in August, Angelo Gross struggled that day. And I kind of red flagged a little bit here on the podcast. And he also was burned against Youngstown State. And although that was a mop-up time and it was a blowout, Michigan State won, I was like, man, Angelo Gross was good as a freshman, but a little bit of a fish out of the water there. I give him credit, very, very noble, hardworking, sincere, given everything he's got. And they asked him to play a difficult position back there. So now this spring, I'm sure he'll get tested. He needs to have a clean day. Meanwhile, Jayden Magnum, thin guy, rangy guy, learning as he goes, athletic, ability, maybe more body type, natural to be a safety. He's got a lot to learn because he's a freshman, but there's some competition going on there. Question number 6, Charles from Alexandria, Virginia says, given some of the recent updates with only 7 offensive linemen practicing, is depth a bigger concern than expected? That's the question. The answer is yes. Depth is they knew it was going to be a problem this spring. Vandermark gets bumped out a little bit. Horst, is he available? Is he not? Hard to say. So then just trying to get 2 offensive lines on the field becomes a challenge just to have a practice. You need to have 2 units working to run a first string, run the play, and a second string to run the play to service your defense, among other things. So, like I was talking about with Paul earlier, they will have 4 incoming freshmen to join the group this summer, and also at least 1 transfer portal guy. So 5 new faces, maybe 6 added to these guys, but as of now, it's kind of reminiscent of what the cornerback situation looked like last spring. As far as that first-string offensive line, Jarrett Horst at left tackle, if he's available, and Brandon Baldwin over there at left tackle as well. Left guard, J.D. Duplain. Not sure how available J.D. Duplain has been. Nick Samac at center. And you've got Matt Carrick at right guard, but he's not available because he's still nursing a torn ACL from last fall. He's on schedule. They're expecting him to be able to compete in the fall. Not sure what that's going to look like. But Carrick started 2 years ago, and then this past season came off the bench at right guard and actually graded out better than he did the year before as a starter. Carrick was solid last year before he got hurt. So if he can get back up to that level, he'll be a good right guard starter, I would think. He's got the potential to become one. Right tackle, Spencer Brown, all of a sudden he had that great game, had a real nice game in the bowl game. Boom, your job, right tackle. So those are the main people right now. Dallas Fincher bouncing around in there a little bit, guard center. You can have Brian Green coming in from Washington State. He's a guard center type of guy. So that's the outlook there. You know who the names are. How good are they going to be? Not sure, but I'll be eager to see if Horst plays and what he's looking like. Be eager to see Brown, eager to see, Wigginton at guard. Is he just like a guy, a second string Ohanba type of guy, or is he a guy that can compete to get on the field or help? But also Ethan Boyd, Brandon Baldwin, they need help at offensive tackle. R. Kruger from Parts Unknown says, what are my guesses on Michigan State's next commitment? The Dellinger kid, the offensive lineman from Clarkston, 4-star, had a real good visit recently. Michigan State pushed for a commitment. I think that one, I think he said he wants to make a decision within about 5 weeks or so, a month and a half. I think Michigan State's in solid shape there. And then Yates, the corner from Texas, he'll be coming in for the green-white game, I think. I think those 2 guys, a couple 4-stars, Michigan State's in solid shape there. You never know when all of a sudden an in-state guy is going to pop, though. Like the tight end from Dexter, boom, all of a sudden he committed. You just never know when those in-state guys. It can happen quickly with some of them. Jay Bannon from Sterling Heights says, when have you ever seen so many highly rated recruits visiting Michigan State on their own dime from so far away? The answer is never. I've never seen guys pay their own way, 4-stars, to come in to visit, unofficial visits, January, March, and so forth, spring break, and so forth. He also asks, do you expect the center from Washington State, that's Brian Green, do you expect his presence will allow Nick Samac to move to guard? Good question. They're going to play their best 5. He'll come in and compete. Green has been a center, and he's been a guard in the past. Samac has been mainly a center, but he can play guard. There's a chance that Green could end up becoming a better center than Samac is, and maybe Samac moves to guard. But if he moves to guard, Duplain's going to be good at left guard, split time with Carrick. Yeah, I think either Green or Samac, I could see them moving over to right guard to split time with Carrick to take a little bit of the load off Carrick as he gets his footing coming off that injury. I think that it creates some versatility there, yes. He also asks, this is still Jay Bannon from Sterling Heights. He says, how fast do you think the defensive end, defensive tackle spots are going to fill up on the recruiting sheet for Michigan State? That's a hard one to say, but if 1 or 2 fills up, it's going to be competitive. Then it becomes like musical chairs, and if you like Michigan State, you got to sit down, otherwise someone else will take your place. But they're in on some good ones. Etta Snow is a top 250 defensive end from Colleyville, Texas. He's coming in for the green-white game. Jaylen Thompson, number 180 player in the country from Cass Tech, defensive tackle. He visited 10 days ago, had a real good visit. He's building a strong relationship with defensive line coach Marco Coleman. Of course, he knows Thomas Wilcher from Wilcher's days as head coach at Cass Tech. Michigan State's right in there with Jaylen Thompson. He's got a visit coming up with Ohio State that he's excited about. And let's see who else. Yeah, Kentucky and Cincinnati. And I was talking to Jason Kilp about this earlier. And USC's been pushing a little bit. I have to wait and see on that. But Michigan State's been strong with Jaylen Thompson from the beginning. I could see that one happening. Other defensive end, Rico Walker, 4-star from Hickory, North Carolina. Jason Kilp had a good story about him with his visit this week. So there's not room for a lot of defensive ends, but Michigan State's in on some good ones. And I talked earlier about Nicholas Harbor, the guy from D.C., number 15 player in the country, 6'5", 5-star, just ran a 10.300 meters, freakazoid, right? But I mean, everybody's in on him. Auburn, Miami, Texas A&M, LSU. Michigan State's in there on some of those guys, and he's planning to visit. There's also the guy from Texas, top 25-star guy, and with Brandon Jordan involved, he catches the attention of some of those 5-star defensive ends from a long way away that Michigan State never would have gotten in on in the past. Is it possible Michigan State could become realistic for some of these guys, the best defensive ends in the country? Not in the past if you've been a Michigan State fan for a long time, but I'm not going to say never. You'll know when I know, but it's impressive they've got the attention of those guys. Finishing it with those guys is a different story, but Michigan State's in it to win it. We'll see what they'll learn as they go. Question number 9, Adam from Montclair, New Jersey says, what do you see as a bigger need for next year's basketball team, a center or a small forward from the portal? What are the odds that Izzo lands either? Michigan State is interested in a small forward from the portal for this year. Everybody knows about the Jalen Bridges kid from West Virginia. Michigan State's in there. Ohio State's in there. Alabama's in there with him. A solid guy. I don't know if he's a difference maker. But center, I don't think, a lot of people think they need a center because you've been watching the Big Ten all year with Coburn and Dickinson and Edey and all these big guys. But the big guy like at Auburn didn't go very far. Now, Williams at Duke played really well in the tournament. When I watched him late in the season, I thought he was a little bit casual, but he played better in the tournament. North Carolina had Baycott. What's he, 6'9"? But in terms of 7-foot big dudes, teams with those big dudes didn't go very far. Purdue didn't go very far. Michigan went to the Sweet 16, good for them. Illinois didn't go very far. Auburn didn't go very far. Duke did, but that guy was surrounded by a ton of talent. He wasn't focal point guy. He was I don't want to say garbage guy, but Williams was excellent in some ways. But Villanova was smallish. Baycott, 6'9", I think it was. You can look it up. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that. Kansas with McCormick, he was kind of maligned, criticized much of the year, but he played well late in the season. You need to have someone like that because when you're presented with a team that is strong inside, you need to be able to defend it. Can Marble do that? Matty Sissoko. That's the deal. All right, Michigan State's got 5 big guys if Joey Hauser comes back. You've got Sissoko, Marble, Malik Hull, Joey Hauser, and Jackson Kohler coming in. That's 5 big guys. If you had a center from the portal, that gives you 6 big guys, and you've got the same problem we had 2 years ago when you had too many big guys and none of them developed. You can say that you're not thrilled with Marble or Sissoko, and you can have that opinion. But they've got 5 with Kohler coming in. I don't think they go to the portal to get a big man. If Hauser leaves, that could change a few things. They're giving Hauser some time and space, but no news might be favorable news on that front. I think they'd like to have him back. And if he gets a little spring in his step and decides he wants more, he had a great game against Davidson. You saw him, he was crying at the end of the Duke game. Looked like a guy that didn't want it to be over. Now Sissoko has a frame, has some ability, has some will, has some heart, gives effort, but he needs to know what the heck's going on when he gets on the court. Too many times he got on the court, didn't know the play. And last year didn't play very many minutes, and Izzo said a few times, we need him to hang with us. We think he's going to be a great player, which is code to his people, don't transfer, we still have plans for you. But Sissoko has a long way to go. He was raw when they got him. He was a top 50 guy. That's what top 50 big men look like sometimes. I know those of you that follow recruiting get all excited about a guy who's ranked, number 40 in the country at 6'10". This guy's going to be great. No, 6'10", number 40 in the country. They look like Matty Sissoko. Nothing against Sissoko, but there's just not many people roaming the planet that are teenagers that can just plug and play and come in and be good low post players, offensively and defensively and rebounding right away. Sissoko's got to learn the game more, and it's going to be a big offseason for him. But Michigan State's done a pretty good job in player development in the past, and they're going to need that out of Sissoko. I would think this year, Sissoko, Marble, 20 minutes apiece. That's what it looks like right now. I've not talked to Izzo since the season ended. I'll try to get with him at some point. Maybe I'll see him on the recruiting trail and see what they're thinking. But from the outside looking in, educated guess, that's what it looks like right now. Question number 10, Ricky from Grand Rapids says, how about some hoops info? Any insight? And what are your thoughts on the assistant coaching vacancy? Any thoughts on the Max Christie stuff? We've been talking about Max Christie over at the Final Four message board. If you're not a subscriber, go over there and see what we've been talking about. As far as assistant coach goes, DJ Stevens getting that coaching job at Western Michigan. Congratulations to him. Really good guy. Put in a lot of work over the years. Contributed a lot to the program. Good person. He's excited about the opportunity. I wish him well at Western Michigan. I hope he does well. Stevens, as a lot of people know, really good in terms of recruiting in-state and nationally. Just a real good communicator. Just a real straight shooter that was respected on the recruiting trail. Did a lot of good things in recruiting over the years. And also was like the number 4 assistant, then the number 3 assistant, number 2, and really became Izzo's top confidant on the bench in recent years. He was the guy that Izzo would talk to during the course of a game for in-game adjustments and so forth. Montgomery kind of became that role a little bit more this year, and they traded that off a little bit. But Stevens also was entrusted to handle a lot of low-post player development. Did a good job with Xavier Tillman over the years, Adrian Payne, and some of these others. Could have gotten a little bit more out of Bingham, but some of that's on Bingham. Bingham's a good kid, always wanted to face up, shoot instead of working on his post moves. But Bingham ended up being a good, solid college player. One more year, he could have been better than solid, but looks like he's not going to be around for that. But so if Stevens is gone, you're losing a recruiting piece, but you're also losing some of that low post player development. So you want to replace with some recruiting ability. It's also an opportunity for Michigan State to infuse a little more youth into the assistant coaching staff, but you also need some low post player development expertise. So you're losing a lot with Stevens. I've talked before about Lavelle Jordan, a guy that Izzo's been close with in the past, recently fired as head coach at Butler. Native of Albion, Michigan, was a former assistant at Iowa and Michigan. Michigan State has talked to Lindsey Hunter in the past. He was head coach at Mississippi Valley State, former Detroit Piston, recently fired at Mississippi Valley State. There's been talk about Tom Crean. I wouldn't be shocked if Tom Crean came back as an analyst if he wants to. Former Michigan State assistants have come back as analysts in recent years. Brian Gregory was an analyst. Kind of Nick Saban style. You bring in fired coaches, put them on staff. You can use some of their brain work here a little bit. Wojcik was an analyst and played an important role in 2019 when Michigan State won the Big Ten, swept Michigan, went to the Final Four. Wojcik was an analyst, an X's and O's guy, was a guy that helped Cassius Winston a lot also with, film work and just stuff like that off the court. Gregory, Wojcik. Wouldn't shock me if that happened. I don't know if Crean is interested. I don't know if Izzo's interested. There's been some talk about that. Would not shock me, but I've not heard anything officially about that. Although there is one insider over at the Final Forum message board who is a very astute observer who's been real accurate with inside information in the past that says there is some rumblings about Crean. I've not talked to Izzo. I've not heard that, but go over to the Final Forum. We put some stuff over there as we hear it. We can't put everything up there because sometimes we hear things in confidence and we can't, if stuff's off the record, it's off the record. But sometimes we say stuff, sometimes we hint about stuff. Question number 11 from Hayden V out of southeastern Grand Rapids. He says, what have you been able to gather regarding the open staffing position? We just went through that. Question number 12. Please give your input regarding the improvement expected in the secondary on the football team. Can this group go from bottom of the conference to top 5 this fall? I think top 5 is possible. I know that would be an amazing jump. And we talked about that earlier with Konendijk. I know Michigan State ranked dead last in the country in terms of yards allowed in pass defense. I'll say it all summer. Dead last in passing yards, but number 67 in the country in yards allowed per pass attempt. Number 14 in the Big Ten in yards allowed, but number 10 in yards allowed per pass attempt. 10 is not great, not good enough, but moving from 10 to 5 in the Big Ten, definitely possible. You just have got more familiarity, more cohesion, more understanding. Amir's speed's going to help. Ronald Williams is going to be more comfortable. He's going to help. Kimbrough's going to be in there. I'm thinking coming off the bench for either one of those guys, solid. Konendijk made a great point. Lowry might be better suited for that nickel role. I've heard that Kimbrough's been in there in that nickel role, but Lowry's more physical. If they're switching off there, that can be solid. Henderson's going to be solid at safety. You need to keep him healthy, and you don't need him playing 600-plus snaps like last year. He'll be okay. Gross, that other safety position, needs to come around. I know they tried Darius Snow there in the bowl game. Now Snow's a linebacker. I should have mentioned Snow earlier when we were talking about linebackers and what we're going to see in the spring game. But Gross needs to improve, or Mangum needs to do it. A.J. Kirk's in the mix somewhere. But in order for Michigan State to do what you're saying and become one of the top 5 in pass defense in the Big Ten, which I think is possible, you need the pass rush. You need linebackers to be more solvent in pass defense than they were last year. They were shaky there, and I'm not surprised that they've kind of changed linebacker coachings at Michigan State because that seemed shaky. So safety's got to get more solid. And if that happens, then what you're saying is possible. Michigan State statistically was terrible in pass defense last year. In a roundabout way, you're asking, can it get better? Is it going to stay the way it was? No, it does not have to stay the way it was. Question number 13, Sola from Westland, Michigan says, have you specifically heard about any young offensive linemen that have impressed? Any walk-ons or freshmen or redshirt freshmen? You mentioned walk-ons, No, I've not seen walk-ons, and I've shot some film at practice, but I need to take a closer look at the offensive linemen. But you know what? I don't think there are many walk-on offensive linemen. That's why they've had to move a couple walk-on defensive tackles over there, Brunning and Lefebvre. So there's a shortage of walk-on offensive linemen. Usually walk-on offensive linemen man those second-string slots in the spring. But it just occurs to me that now that you've asked that question, that where are the walk-ons? There are no walk-on offensive linemen. Is that an area that's been overlooked a little bit? That's a good question. Now, last year they had so many players on the offensive line. Well, and then Blake Buter decided not to come back. He was a walk-on that got on the field and started. But that's an interesting point. Usually Michigan State has more walk-on offensive linemen available. And I'd have to get the roster and just look through. Obviously they don't have them because they've had to bring in walk-on defensive tackles to fill those slots. I'm just gonna look up MSU football roster. I'm just out of curiosity here. The spring roster. This is the way I am. I'm sorry. This is not good broadcasting. This is dead air. But I'm just really curious about offensive linemen here. Let me go to the 50s. Offensive linemen. Baldwin, scholarship guy. Carrick, scholarship guy. Evan Brunning's the defensive tackle from Oxford, 6'5", redshirt junior. They're moving him to offensive line just to be able to field 2 units. Spencer Brown, scholarship. Nick Samak, scholarship. Jacob Lefebvre. Okay, they've got him listed as an offensive lineman. Okay, I kind of thought he was a defensive tackle in the past. Maybe Lefebvre was an offensive lineman all along. From Brighton, he's a walk-on. Duplain, Wigginton, Fincher, Vandemark, Ethan Boyd, Horst, all scholarship guys. And those are all the offensive linemen they've got. So, yeah, usually you've got like those, all kinds of, who was the Van Opstal was second string offensive tackle last year, walk on. Going all the way back, there was like Mike Bacon. There have been a lot of good, solid walk on offensive linemen, but they're a little shallow there now. So anyway, you're asking any young guys that have looked good. Vandemark was looking good at right guard. He's a little bumped and banged. He probably won't play in the scrimmage. I don't know. He's been sitting out, but he's the guy. Vandemark, was he from New Jersey? True freshman. These are big guys also. When you're at the green-white game, you will notice that Michigan State just has, if you look closely, the bigger frames are evident. Bigger crew. At corner, offensive line, bigger people. Some big wide receivers also. They've gotten bigger. That's by design with Mel Tucker. Dallas Fincher is not as young as some of these others, but he's been getting a little bit of traction there as a backup center. Kevin Wigginton, true freshman, playing some left guard. Ethan Boyd, true freshman, playing some tackle. And Brandon Baldwin, junior college, sophomore, playing some left tackle. Those are the 5. And none of them, those guys are not ready for prime time, but they're not behind schedule. And Fincher was a D'Antonio guy. He's 6'4". These other guys are 6'5" or taller. So they're getting a lot thrown at them this spring. You're asking who has looked impressive. What I'm hearing, they've looked good in flashes. They need consistency, which is what you expect with teenagers at the offensive line. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that somebody's the next Tony Mandarich or something like that, but I don't think they want to trade any of those guys. Question number 14 from Go Wings Go from Hockeytown. He says, what's my best guess on how the percentage of running back carries will play out early this season? These are some good, well-thought-out questions. I appreciate these questions from these people over there at the Underground Bunker message board. Percentage breakdown. I'm guessing Broussard's going to be number one. And I'm guessing that 3 running backs will get carries in games. And the breakdown's usually like 65%, 25%, and then maybe 10%. So Broussard, 65%. I'm going to say Berger, 25%. And who's going to get 10%? I'll go Collins, I guess. Could be Jordan Simmons. But do Collins and Simmons, do they hang around to be third string? Does somebody enter the portal? Does Davion Prim get in up there for number 3? Harold Joyner's been number 3 in the past. Can he get up there? I don't know. I'm going to say Collins, but I don't know. Man, that's a good question. We might know a little bit more after the spring scrimmage. Question number 15, WX Spartan 23 from Parts Unknown. He asks, any more insight on the A.J. Hoggard drama? Was it on-court actions? Is the question. Answer is, things have gotten better. I've mentioned in the past there were some wrinkles that needed to be ironed out, a little bit of strain that needed to be straightened out. And Hoggard played at the end of the year like he was trying to impress the coaches and listening to the coaches, trying to improve and carry out the things that they want, especially Izzo. So I think they may have hit common ground there. We all see that Hoggard has excellent ability, both on defense at 6'4", ability to move laterally, play with some strength, ability to go to the hole, absorb some contact, and score. He's got good passing ability, good court vision. They want him to be a little bit more of a pass-first type of guy in some situations. They want him to work on his game more as a shooter. And then they want him to be a little bit more of a we guy, bringing people along and building people up like a point guard is supposed to. So they're working on that right now. It's been 2 weeks since they've had their exit interviews, and right now no news is good news right there. And the forecast has gotten a little bit better there. Good, solid talent, and we'll see what happens. Question number 16, Adam from Brighton says, what are you hearing about the kicking game so far? Lots of folks talking about the passing games need to compensate for us losing Walker on the ground, but we've lost McLovin as well, the kicker. He was good, but got shaky towards the end with an injury. True. He says, I like how aggressive Jay Johnson's offense is compared to the past, but we also need to know when to settle for 3 points in close games. The kid Stone, is it Jack Stone from Texas? He's the guy. And there was the kid from, was it Clarkston or Oxford, kicker, that came in. Was it Rusnak? He subbed in for McLovin, didn't look so good. I've not heard anything more from the portal. But Jack Stone played for a really good team in Texas, handled kickoffs, and I don't know if he handled field goals. And I never really got a really good answer on why. I know Stone really impressed in some of those summer kicking competitions, but you're handing that over to a freshman coming in? I'm with you. Place kicking is, it's a question mark. I think you're whistling to the graveyard a little bit with the kicking situation, because that can derail a season in a hurry. Michigan State's kicking has been good, solid, consistent, reliable for years. But we've seen other seasons, there was a John L. Smith second year when they lost 3 or 4 games on field goals. You go all the way back to 1993 when Stoyanovich was supposed to be a really good kicker and just hit a mental block, and they lost 2 or 3 or 4 games due to kicking in 93, back in the Perlis years. It can be a problem. And there's no proven commodity there. And you're right, it is important. And I don't have a good answer for you. For the spring scrimmage, I'll be interested to see what happens. I know that, Rusnak is still around. Is he going to look any better? I suppose that's possible. I mean, hey, I remember, who was the guy that had the game-winning field goal against Florida in the 1999 Citrus Bowl from Florida? Beat the Gators. Was it Ettinger? he played as a true freshman punter and got a couple of kicks as a freshman place kicker, and it looked horrid. But by his senior year, he was an all-conference kicker. So sometimes kickers can make that type of improvement. So the Rusnak kid, I mean, you look at Bryce Behringer, how he's come around as a punter. Never would have expected that. But yes, Steven Rusnak from Clarkston. And there's one other kicker on the roster. Jarrett Reeser, kicker, 5'10", freshman from Canyon County, California. I think we had something on him as a walk-on a few months ago. But no, you're exactly right. That's a question mark, and I've not had a chance to ask Mel Tucker about it. I'm not sure he has been asked about it, but Tucker doesn't give a lot of insight. He doesn't give a lot of insight on some of those things because he doesn't want to give away scouting information. So the best information is going to come through the visual at the scrimmage on Saturday. Jack Stone won't be there, but these other guys, we'll see if Rusnak's any better. They need him to be better. Let's see, do I have any more questions over here in the mailbag? Brian from Flushing says, so we've heard some praise about Davion Prim. What about Eaglin? Don't hear much about him. Yeah, I've not heard much about Eaglin being on the field this spring. We'll see if we see him on Saturday. I think he's got ability, but you've only got room for so many running backs. I wish him well. I've not heard anything, but I think he could be like a solid running back at, a Conference USA level. It's just hard to get on the field right now at Michigan State at running back. I hope that doesn't anger anybody. I'm trying to compliment the kid, but it's just, there's only one football. Question number 17, from DC from Las Vegas says, have the injuries on the offensive line hampered the development of the running game or how our defensive line practices? Great question. And if you're not able to field two offensive line units, it can have an impact on defensive line. Sharpen iron has to sharpen iron. I've not heard coaches mention that, but I think it is possible. It's not ideal for your D-line to go against a bunch of freshmen and then not have a complete second offensive line. It's a good point. Can't be a good thing. He says also, question, will Michigan State run more defensive fronts than last year? Considering the influx of talent and depth at linebacker, should we expect to see any 3-3-5 or 3-4 looks from the defense? Maybe just on obvious pass rushing plays. No, I think it's going to be the same 4-2-5 with a nickel. But you're right. You're going to have some good linebackers on the third string. And you had that last year, too. Harvey ended up being out of the playing group a little bit until later when Crouch wasn't available. I don't think we're going to see Crouch. But in terms of linebackers, I think it's going to be Halliday and Winman. I think it's going to be Brule and either Nateote and then you have Snow. So you have 5 solid linebackers. One of the 5 is going to be third string, to your point. Will they change and make one of those guys be an edge guy? Maybe Brule could be an edge guy in pass rush situations. But no, I don't think they're going to be making wholesale changes on defensive fronts. All right, let's go over here to the comments area. Zip through this stuff, bonus round style. Trying to go a little quicker, even though it's been 2 hours already. Mr. Bowman says, I only want to know who will run the rock for us. We've talked about it earlier. Gordon Tonona says he's got a great nickname for Caton Hauser. Wants to call him the Howitzer. Okay. Aaron May says, Comp, what's your preliminary assessment of how the defense is rounding out? I don't really have a preliminary one just yet. I mean, we need to see something better. We need to see what goes on at defensive end. We need to see what happens at safety. Getting bigger over there. I think indications aren't bad. Chris Martinez, I missed this earlier. I'm sorry I'm getting late to this. Chris Martinez with personal sponsorship. Really appreciate that, Chris. Thank you very much. Fist bump Attaboy, pat in the back. Thank you. Appreciate that, Chris. Chris says, what's driving the reservations about Jalen Hunt reaching his potential? Jalen Hunt, D'Antonio liked him in 2019, and then not so much in 20, and then didn't do much last year. He's just not getting on the field. And I don't know how bright his pilot light is lit right now. I don't know where I'm just not sure. Just not sure. I know he's a 4-star guy and all that. Just not sure what's under the hood there. He's got some ability, but what are the reservations? It kind of reminds me of who was the offensive lineman from Belleville that moved on? That never really did much. Was a 4-star. Same type of thing. Maybe he'll prove me wrong beginning next weekend, but I wouldn't be buying stock in that right now. I don't mean to disrespect the kid, but you're asking me. I'm a reporter, going by what I hear and what I see, and I'm just trying to provide some credible information for you. Maybe he can turn the corner and start rallying, but I'm looking at defensive tackle. I'm looking at Barrow. I'm looking at Slade. I'm looking at Maverick Hansen. And then Mallory's is a guy that's got to find his proper fight and weight. And then Harmon's in there. I think those are the 5. George Page, former guitar player and keyboard player for Surrender Dorothy, one of the top 25 bands in East Lansing music history. Surrender Dorothy says, hi, Comp. Love SpartanMag. Any thoughts on the Hoops program? Coaching hire? Does Coach Izzo use the portal? Talked about that a few minutes ago. He's interested in the portal. Wing, probably. Depending on what Hauser does, we'll see if there's more. But George Page, he's hinted about a possible Surrender Dorothy reunion. Maybe at Rick's American Cafe. I hope that happens. If it does, George, you got to let me know. I'll get some of my people together and we'll have a good time. My question to you is whether you would have both of your original lead singers or just one. You had the blonde girl and the brunette girl, and then the blonde girl left and just the brunette girl circa 1996. Do you bring both of them back for the reunion or just one of them? Would like to know. Chris Martinez says, at the hospital in Evanston, we welcomed a new Spartan to our family yesterday. Congratulations to you, Chris Martinez. We will, what's this? That's what we'll do for that one. Congratulations, new Spartan over at the Evanston Hospital. Is that your first, Chris? Nothing like it, man. They grow up quick. Mine are 15 and 17 now. And they don't think I'm as smart as they used to. They used to think I was pretty smart. Not so much anymore. Getting a little bit blurry here. I don't know what's going on. Not really sure what's going on there. Starting to blur out a little bit. You guys probably don't care. It's probably an improvement. All right, yeah, Mr. Bowman says, congrats, Chris. I second that. John Elke says, how's the offensive line coming along? We talked about that earlier. Adam Huntenstein says, have you heard anything new on the name, image, and likeness front with regards to recruiting? Any collective type rumors? We're all eager to spend Matt Ishby's money. No, I've asked some coaches about that, and they're like, technically it's against the law. It's against the rules. We're not supposed to use it for recruiting. So that's what you hear. I don't know anything official on that. Shifty I0 says, finally, Jim is back streaming, ready for you to drop some knowledge on us. Thanks, Shifty I0. Dog Kenneth says, hello, pals. Love the recruiting coverage. Fun times. Greg Mills says, go green from Chicago. Chris Martinez is glad to see Pyatt play well today in the Masters. What an experience. So I don't know what Pyatt did. I know that he struggled in the first day of the Masters. U.S. amateur champion, Spartan golfer. Must have played well today. Good for him. Starting to lose my voice. Don't have much time left. Fourth quarter. Hold him up. Peyton Fleetmeyer says Chris Martinez, or says that Pyatt had the same score as Tiger in the second round. How do you like that? Eric M says, give us a thumbs up. Yes, it'd be great to have thumbs ups. And subscribe to the channel. Mr. Bowman says the Purdue game still has me shaking my head. Purdue, Braum came in, did some good things early at Purdue. Had a good year, too. Seemed like a tough guy, type of guy. Then kind of went down a little bit. But this year, man, Purdue's scheming on offense was good. And I just heard that Purdue, they just sweetened his contract a little bit. It's worth it. And that guy is the mind behind their offense. And it was legit. They moved the ball on people. And they did it with triangles all over the place and reads. And I told you that quarterback was good when they beat Iowa. I forget his name now. I'm out of football season, so I can't remember what his name is. But when that dude threw for like 330 yards against Iowa, like Sunday I put in the game and watched. I'm like, how did this dude throw for 330 against Iowa? I got to watch this. And he was making reads, and he was accurate. It had enough zip on it. I know he's a walk-on, but I came here on this thing, and I said, I don't know. I'm not Gil Brandt. I'm not a scout. But that guy looks like he's got pro potential to me. Then that was like halfway through the season. Then the second half of the season, he was good. Then they beat, who'd they beat in the bowl game? Tennessee? Hey, that's a good outfit there at Purdue. And that quarterback's coming back. I don't know. They lose David Bell at wide receiver, but they'll have other guys. They had a nice system. And they put numbers up on Michigan State. They put numbers up on Iowa. They put numbers up on Ohio State. Purdue was number 5 in the country in pass offense. No joke. Mark Galfano says, who starts at linebacker? Do we bring more blitz packages into the fold this year? Who starts at linebacker? I'm thinking Halliday and Windman. That's my guess right now. Do we bring more blitz packages? It'll probably be the same type of blitz frequency. They will blitz probably the same amount. Some passing situations here and there. I don't think they'll blitz more. Will they have different blitz looks? Yeah, they won't run the exact same blitz looks every single time. There'll be different things. But I wouldn't expect, you're not going to get Joe Lee Dunn blitzes all the time. 0 blitzes all over the place. Slim Pickens says, yeah, SpartanMag, greetings from Bradenton, Florida. Slim Pickens says, looking forward to Spartan football, go green. All right, looking forward to spring football. Don't be talking about looking forward to fall football. We need to enjoy our summer. It's not summer here yet. Got sunshine back there in that picture that was from last December, 2 Decembers ago. Need some new pictures up in the press box next time I get a chance. But it's been rainy here in East Lansing. It's been rainy. I'm kind of doing some assistant coaching over at Okemos varsity baseball team, and we've been practicing indoors every single day. Last year, I was head coach of the JV. We didn't practice indoor once. We got out, and we didn't have any practices rained out and no games rained out all year. We've already had a week and a half of practices rained out. We're supposed to play tomorrow. We've had like 4 games rained out. It'll be, yeah, it's not been good. So don't be wishing for fall just yet. Chris Foolin says it's possible we can see Gates crack the top 5 in the receiver rotation. Talking about Antonio Gates Jr. Well, he'll be coming in August, and there's going to be a lot of talent ahead of him, and he has ability, but he'll have to learn to work and get in line and get de-recruited a little bit. And, is he going to be high maintenance? No, I said Keon Coleman was going to be high maintenance. Antonio could be high maintenance. There's a lot of talent in front of him. So I don't top 5. I'm kind of doubting it. Because top 5, as you wrote Jaden Reed, Mosley, Keon Coleman, Jeremy Bernard, and then Antonio Gates. Well, I would think Montori Foster and Christian Fitzpatrick will be ahead of Gates to begin with. Foolin says, Tucker said freshman Miller was supposed to be an impact player coming in to compete for time at tackle. Yeah, Braden Miller, I really liked his film coming out of Colorado. I really did. I know they ran on a 4-star. I forget the guy's name. Bear was his name, from Ohio. I think Miller's every bit the 4-star that Bear was. And I liked Bear a lot. He ended up where? At Pitt, I think. Braden Miller from Colorado looks good on film. But I tell you, Ashton Lepo coming in from Holland, he's up to 6'7.5" now, athletic guy. They got him stock on the rise at about 240 pounds, and he's like 280 now or more. Maybe a longer-term guy, but some good ability coming in with those offensive linemen. It's a big guy from Arizona, right? And then the big guy, Christian Phillips from Georgia, looked better in his senior film. His junior film, I didn't see a lot of bend with him. I wasn't so sure about him, but we'll see. Jarek Broussard, let's get it. Go Green. Sam from Hawaii, but you live in Ohio. Samuel DeJesus, good to hear from you. Graphic Destiny 7887, is Broussard playing? Not until the summer. Gordon's got the answer on that one. He's still in Colorado. Gary Martinez says Duffy Doherty used to recruit Hawaii and Samoa for big, strong warrior types. Is there any talent out there? Good question. I've not heard Michigan State getting out there much. There was someone from the Pecco family that Michigan State was looking at last year. He's a linebacker from California, but didn't end up getting that involved with him. It's a good question. I've not detected much of that lately. Definitely good players out there, though. YT Sparty says, so what's the deal with Max Christie? Michigan State's coach is trying to figure that out also. He's testing the NBA waters, but there's also some indications he might be testing other waters too. Sometimes when a player comes in and he's a 5-star and he's ranked number 30 in the country and he thinks he's going to play 1 year and then go to the pros. But he comes in and he shoots 31% from three-point range, which is substandard. But he still thinks he needs to test the water because he was 5-star. Why somebody thinks they need to test the water in the NBA when you don't play well in the Big Ten. I'm not saying he's always going to struggle in the Big Ten, but when you struggle like that, what you do is you get your butt back to campus, you get in the gym, and you put your nose to the grindstone, and you work your tail off, and you try to make corrections, and you look at film, and you follow the lead of other people that have done it before, and you go back to work when you meet adversity. I'm saying this as a stupid fat sports writer in his 50s. Christie's got all kinds of ability. I'm trying to talk like I've never been on the court. I've never like those guys have, but I've seen other guys do it, and that's the way it's usually done. And that's probably what Izzo's thinking. That's probably what Wojcik is thinking. That's probably what Montgomery's thinking. That's probably what the coaches are thinking. It's probably what his teammates are thinking. You get to college, you're 5-star, top 30, McDonald's All-American, you meet some adversity, you go back to work. But this day and age, meet some adversity, you go home and you think about changing uniforms. Like that's going to fix everything. So we'll see. Maybe there'll be some maturity that comes in and he decides to come back to Michigan State and go back to work. But there's some frustration there. We'll see what happens, and we'll see what kind of jersey happens. Charles L. says, do you think Brandon Jordan will play a pivotal role in higher 4- or 5-star kids coming into the program from here on out? Yeah, I think there's a chance. And he's just getting started. So everybody knows what his level of credibility is as a teacher of pass rush skills at the professional level, at the highest level, state of the art. If he starts churning out NFL defensive ends and pass rushers at Michigan State, then yes, more and more it'll help recruiting. It'll feed off each other. It's not there yet. Michigan State has obviously caught the attention of some top defensive ends around the country. Whether they get any of those remains to be seen. But if and when they start turning out NFL defensive ends and pass rushers, that's when it can feed off of itself. And if that happens, you're going to have to pay them more too. So it's just in its infancy right now, but that's the plan. Matthew McClue says, what's wrong with the hockey and baseball programs, and can you actually see them start improving soon? Can I see them start improving soon? Bizarre how bad we've been in both. Baseball's got a lot of new faces this year. They lost a lot of people to the portal. That's a difficult situation. I don't know. In terms of seeing signs that they're turning it around, that was impressive when they beat Houston, Dallas Baptist 3 straight, and they take 3 out of 4 from UNLV. There were some decent signs early on. Then Illinois swept them. Evansville took 2 from them this last weekend. Is Michigan State playing Ohio State this weekend? I'm not sure, but no, you're asking, are there signs that baseball's turning around? I've not seen that yet. Hockey, hey, I didn't see them losing 15 out of 16 coming down the stretch. That surprised everybody. And then the goalie, DeRitter, who's a pretty good one, goes into the portal and goes to North Dakota. This is after Michigan State kind of thought he was coming back for his 6th year and they would get him, but they didn't know for sure. That's not a good sign. The recruiting piece for hockey, a lot of people thought that they'd be getting into that USA developmental team because that's where Cole coached in the past. Hasn't happened. So on all fronts there, I would tell you if there's like some really good signs on things. They've had a couple good players here and there, but the Gucciardi, the freshman defenseman, shows some good things, but you need more than one or two good ones. You need a lot of them. They've got this they just got someone from the transfer portal from RPI. I've not looked into him to see what his story is. You would think Michigan State would be an attractive destination for transfer portal in hockey. Like if you're the best player at Union, or even if you're a real good player at Quinnipiac, or a really good player at Northern Michigan. Well, last year, they had the Lockering guy, and he was hurt. He had some goal-scoring ability, but I think he can come back next year. He could help. I know they got the transfer from, was it Colorado College, who went back, I think, technically to the USHL. But anyway, theoretically, if you're a good player at, I don't know, Robert Morris, if you're a great scorer at, I don't know, Colorado College, I would think, I'd like to go play my senior year in the Big Ten at Michigan State. That sounds cool. Seems like Michigan State should be able to make some noise in the portal. So we'll keep waiting to see if anything happens there. I know Michigan State showed some interest in a couple of guys at Ferris State. I don't know if that's gone any further. But anyway, I agree with you. I hear you. YT Spartan says Western and Michigan Tech made the hockey tournament. Michigan State has really fallen. You're right. Malik Carr. Did I say Malik Hall again? I've been calling Malik Hall Malik Carr, and I've been calling Malik Carr Malik Hall since they were recruits. Since they were in the 10th grade, I've been making that mistake, and I can't get it out of my head. Dog Kenneth says, watch Keon Coleman's interview on YouTube when he was in high school and had just committed to Michigan State. Solid dude. Yeah, I'd agree with that. You're right. He's got more poise and maturity than I gave him credit for, so credit to him. YT Spartan says, so is Colin Kaepernick coming to the spring game? Funny. YT Spartan says, I never saw this NFL-like program Tug is building. Total shocker. Tone C says, does Michigan State go after the offensive line from Colorado that hit the portal today? Cap recruited him to Colorado. Tone C, I've been getting ready for this and doing some other stuff. I didn't know about this. I've not been on the bunker in a few hours. That is interesting. I don't know. I wouldn't doubt it. They've at least had a conversation about it. At least. I don't know anything about them, but I'll be looking into that soon. Here it is, January 12th, 2022. Colorado offensive lineman Kanan Ray has put his name in the portal. So he put his name in the portal in January? Kid was an Army All-American. So maybe it wasn't just today. So now you're hit the portal today. So you're saying... So you got conflicting things. Oh, YT Sparty's pointing out that he went in the portal in January. So that would lead me to believe that they've already looked into it. I don't know. Portal stuff happens quickly, as you can see. I'm kind of dodging. I'm kind of trying to field them here. TaylorMade Basketball says, why does Tucker keep taking these DBs who didn't play much at the SEC schools they came from? Well, Amir Speed was at Georgia, started 3 games, 6'3", runs well, has some ability. He got caught in a talent triangle there. They had a kid transfer in from Clemson at corner, and they had a 5-star true freshman come in. So a couple of 5 stars. He wasn't starting. He's playing for the best defense college football scene, one of the best defenses college football scene in the last 20 years. So Amir Speed, it's possible that you can be an NFL player and not start at Georgia, believe it or not. And that's what I think Amir Speed is. So I'm sure that you would rather go to Georgia and get their starters to transfer. But I hope that sounds as ridiculous as it sounds coming out of my mouth. Ronald Williams was a junior college guy. Alabama recruited him. Alabama doesn't just recruit anybody. Not just anybody gets scholarship offers from Alabama and committable offers. Ronald Williams was a wide receiver, went to junior college, played 1 year wide receiver, then moved to defensive back, played 1 year of corner in his life as a sophomore in JUCO, and Alabama recruited him on talent and potential. Goes to Alabama, training camp, breaks his arm. Comes back in November, plays mop-up duty for 3 games. He's got 1 year left. He looks around at Alabama, a lot of NFL players. Michigan State wants him. He goes to Michigan State. He's starting in the Big Ten. He's got a chance to be better next year. So would Michigan State have liked to have taken a starter from Alabama? Obviously. Starters at Alabama are not available in the portal. A second stringer, theoretically, at Alabama might be good enough to help elsewhere. A second stringer at Alabama might be an NFL player. Kimbrough at Florida, Bogle, second string, same type of thing. I realize Florida is not Georgia. Florida is not Alabama, but better than Michael Fletcher, better than Kalen Gervin, who was a 4-star. So that's the idea. Harold Joyner didn't end up being better than K9. Harold Joyner's got some ability. He doesn't look like a running back. He's tall and kind of lean. Running backs don't look like that. But he did a couple of things late in the year last year that showed some spark. I kind of thought he could maybe be, provide a little bit of the Connor Hayward role, maybe. I don't know. But hate to be a smart aleck, but. And going forward, I'll be interested to see what type of portal players become more productive. A starter from UNLV, like Jacoby Windman, or a second-string guy like Amir Speed, Ronald Williams. Brule is a good point. Brule was supposed to be the face of Mississippi State defense. Toward the end of the year, he kind of lost his starting job a little bit. He was a 4-star type of guy. Like Konendijk said, his high school coach thought that he was playing a little bit with some bad weight. And I said that just watching him with some of the all-access stuff at Mississippi State last year. I've mentioned that a couple of times. I've heard he's looking a little more jacked now. I'll look forward to seeing. I've watched him in practice a little bit. I got some film here. I just thought that he just was a little bit fleshy around the arms. Usually with linebackers, you're seeing like not as much body fat. So Brule, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes it up a notch with a new environment. So Brule is a guy. Brule and Speed are both guys, and Bogle also are guys that Tucker knew on the recruiting trail previously. So Tucker already knew these guys a little bit. Anyway, that's that. Gordon Sonoda points out that Speed did start at Georgia. TaylorMade Basketball pointing out that he played a few games, but he lost a spot in Georgia. I've been over that. TaylorMade Basketball says, anyone going to tell Izzo it's 2022 and not 2002? These kids play different and react different to coaching. Let the kids play their game. Let the kids play their game. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what they did at Florida this year with the Gators. Maryland was kind of like that this year, but it was a different situation. Oregon a little bit this year. That guy's a good coach usually, though. Let them play their game. Yeah, you can do that. You probably wind up in the NIT. Duke, yeah, they kind of play their game, but they've got some structure. Don't kid yourself, and they've got 5 stars, top 25 kid after top 25 kid after top 25 kid after top 25 kid. Memphis played better later in the year after they got a handle on things, but Alabama and Auburn on offense, they let them play their game, and Alabama made a run last year, and Auburn was number 1 for a little bit this year, but kind of shot themselves out of it a little bit this year. Let's see. What's Izzo have? 8 Final Fours? I don't know. You're saying it's not 2002 anymore. Yeah, I think there's a happy medium between structure, smart basketball, and some freedom. Some shot making freedom. He'd probably prefer that Max Christie made more of the shots he had the freedom to take. That would have helped. Yeah. Why don't you draw up some suggestions and send them to Izzo? Troy Gillen says, how do you possibly question Tucker taking depth guys from the national champions, best defense in the country? Seems like a no-brainer. Okay, yeah, I think we're just going to move on further here. Jalen Bridges. What's he talking about? I got to read this. I was going. I better read him. TaylorMade Basketball says, just look when he took Ronald Williams from Alabama and he got abused every legit receiver he faced, and our secondary got destroyed, so don't act like we should not be asking the question. Ronald Williams played some pretty good football here and there. Got beat deep early in the game against Northwestern. TaylorMade Basketball is the type of guy that would have been ripping on Mateen Cleaves when he was a freshman, and Eric Snow, and Ronaldo Hill. He's probably not old enough to have been around in those days, but there were a lot of people like that ripped on Ronaldo Hill like crazy when he was a sophomore. Ronald Williams, he's got ability. He wasn't perfect, but to say that he was abused by every legit receiver he faced, I don't know. I mean, some of it, TaylorMade Basketball, I'm guessing, is a guy that would watch Michigan State against Miami of Florida and see Michigan State bailing and playing, cover 4 zone and giving up like a comeback at 12 yards and assume that Ronald Williams was beat on that play when actually he's just playing soft coverage, which was sent in. I appreciate the guys watching and posting, but sometimes. All right, TaylorMade Basketball says, most of today's kids at the Power 5 level don't want to play for Izzo, too old school, and the kid is leaving. Huggins, you can bet he's not going to play for Izzo, similar personalities. I don't know, Aaron Harris played pretty well for Michigan State. He left. Was he at Huggins? He was with Huggins. He did okay. Got injured in his last year. Could have been a little bit better down the stretch. Power 5 kids don't want to play for Izzo, too old school. Yeah, maybe they're. I don't disagree that kids today are less likely to face up adversity and go back to work. You're right. They're wussies. There's more of a wussy factor today than ever before. TaylorMade Basketball, I think you're probably right about that. TaylorMade Basketball says, I wouldn't say that, but today's kids, you have to instill confidence, not break it. Yeah. Okay. TaylorMade Basketball says BLM never said work about yelling at kids as long as it wasn't used with racial words, so save that. I don't know what he's talking about. He seems to have all the answers, though. Okay, Chris Fullen says it was Dobbs you were talking about. Yeah, he left for Memphis. Yeah, that's who I was talking about. Jalen Hunt's kind of similar. Joe Clearwater says hello from Illinois. Joe Clearwater. I wonder if he's related to the great guitarist Eddie Clearwater from Illinois. Mike Bell says, how about those Tigers? Go green. I almost wore a Tiger shirt today. I did have that on today while I was writing my wide receivers story. And that was exciting. Crowd. Bally Sports Detroit did a good job coverage of the fans outside the stadium and capturing the essence of opening day. That was good. I've not been to opening day in a long time. That was good. It's nice to see Natalie with Bally's now. She used to work for Channel 10 here in Lansing, doing a good job. She's got a lot of talent. She's good. She's got a good future. She's fun. From Milford originally. Good gal. Good broadcast. Morris and Petrie and Gibson. Cabrera with a big hit. Drove in a couple of runs. Bases loaded, 2 outs. Was at bottom of the 8th, I think. Haas with a home run. And Baez with the big double off the bench, or off the wall, to win it. It was fun. It was good. YT Sparty says, Underwood reminds me of that guy in Gangs of New York. Which guy? Oh, the mean villain guy, the butcher? Was it Butcher? Or was the guy with the red hair the butcher that got the axe in the back? Disturbing movie. Can you imagine living in New York back then? Can you imagine living anywhere back then? All right, TaylorMade Basketball says, if kids are so soft, why the heck is Izzo recruiting them? If he's got to yell and argue so much, change it up and get difference makers or change coaching style to fit the personnel. Get difference makers. There's an idea. Just get difference makers. That'll fix it. If he's got to yell and argue so much. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure Bill Self never yells. Krzyzewski never yells. Maybe Hubert Davis should have yelled more when things were getting away in the second half, or when they were getting blown out by Wake Forest. They made the finals. Yeah, I mean, some of what you're saying I understand, and it can have an impact on recruiting or keeping kids. Yeah. And, Izzo tried to scale back his yelling this year because the Aaron Harris thing with UCLA, I don't know who talked to him about that. I don't know if the assistant coaches did or what, but he tried to, and he made a point that he was yelling less. But then later he did end up yelling in some other games. Yeah. Points like that, it would have been, we could wonder, how much the universe would look different if Michigan State had held on to beat Duke and made the Sweet 16 and then played Texas Tech. Things might look made a little different. But TaylorMade, he's got the answers, and I'm sure that when Izzo's gone, the next coach, TaylorMade, I'm sure will be a lot happier with whoever the next coach is. Actually, probably a better chance that TaylorMade will never be happy with Michigan State's succession of Izzo replacements, which is not going to go well. Gordon Sonona says Izzo and Huggins do not have similar personalities. Izzo is above and beyond reproach. You must not know any of the backstories of Huggins. Grand Haven, thank you. Ashton Lepos from Grand Haven. I think it's in Holland. West Michigan, beautiful Lake Michigan town. Either way, my bad. TaylorMade Basketball says Izzo takes confidence from kids. Those are facts. Fine line between demanding and dictator. He took confidence from Draymond Green. He took confidence from Cassius Winston. He took confidence from Xavier Tillman. 8 Final Fours. TaylorMade's got all the answers, though. Alex James says he was solid on defense, but unreliable as an offensive player. I'm talking about Max Christie. YT Sparty says Duke made Christie look really small. Christie actually played pretty well against Duke, right? Played well against Duke, played well against Michigan. Mark Stucker says, I really appreciate how try to rein in fans who think we should be going to Texas, Georgia, Florida, and getting 5 stars. Fans need to be realistic. Your 10 4-stars feels very fair and a big upgrade. Yeah, if Michigan State gets 10 4-stars, that's probably a top 10 class. This year would have been top 10 class. In past years, that's what I was surprised about. Michigan State had, 5 4-stars this year and was number 23. Usually if you get 5 4-stars, you're going to be like borderline top 30. I don't know. Gordon Tonona says, you don't get to 8 Final Fours without being a great communicator and teacher. YT Sparty says, Izzo can get in your face, which is good. If he's not in your face and you're not playing, that's worse. That's true also. Mark Stucker says, we really have gone national with recruiting. Very exciting to see. YT Sparty says, yeah, we won't rely on Texas, but if we can steal 1 or 2 kids, that would be amazing. I agree with that. TaylorMade Basketball says 8 Final Fours is good. 8 Final Fours is good, people. 8 Final Fours is good, TaylorMade Basketball says. Purdue's had 2 Final Fours in their history. 3, I think. They've had 1 since 1969. They've had 1 in last 52 years. But 8 Final Fours is just good. You're losing a lot of credibility here. 8 Final Fours is good. If you had given some kids leeway and didn't break the confidence, how many of those Final Fours could have turned into titles? Yeah, he has a title. I mean, they came close. I think, if Kalen Lucas hadn't gotten hurt, I think they would have had a real good chance in 2010. They lost in the Final Four to Butler that year, and then Butler lost to Duke by a point or two. That was the year if Kalen Lucas hadn't gotten hurt, Michigan State would have had a real good chance to win it that year. The year they went to the Elite Eight and lost to UConn, UConn won the national title. The point guard was hurt. The kid from Detroit, I forget his name. The kid got in trouble. If he doesn't get hurt, which affected his defense, but more importantly, affected his shot, could have had one there. They've had some bad luck with some injuries. Allen Anderson in 2005, I don't think they're beating North Carolina, even with a healthy Allen Anderson. But injuries in March, I think, cost Dean Smith a couple of national titles. I think it cost Izzo a couple. He's been bent on trying to get back and getting another one. Would they have had a shot during the COVID year with Winston as a senior and Tillman as a junior? I think they would have had a shot. I know that Kansas would have been good that year also, but Michigan State would have been right in it. So that took that you don't get, there's not many chances when you do get a shot. Dean Smith ended up with 2 national titles. He was really praised as a great coach. Gordon Sonona says, name the names of players Izzo broke the confidence of. TaylorMade Basketball says, players' mentality changed, as did the game. Look at North Carolina, didn't make the tournament last year, and Roy steps away, and Hubert took them to the championship game very near with the same kids. Okay, so Hubert Davis had 3 good weeks. And they were good, and they had good talent. They did a good job going out and getting the transfer from Oklahoma. Baycott played well. Manick was the guy that came in. And Love was really good. So now Hubert Davis, he's been there once. That's good. So now Hubert Davis is great. I think that's called recency bias. North Carolina fans would have told you that he was dog crap 4 weeks ago, which I didn't agree with either. But that's recency bias also. Gordon Sonona, how many Final Fours have you coached? All right, so TaylorMade Basketball says Roy Williams won multiple titles, as did Coach K. They both stepped down because they realized it has passed them. You're ignoring the fact that Izzo is a better coach than either of them. And no, he's not. They stepped down because they were getting old. That's one thing. Number 2, probably the time is right because there's a lot of things in coaching that have made it, that are changing the landscape. Name, image, and likeness. You got to navigate that, and the portal. And like you're saying, a lot of the players are accustomed to running from adversity rather than meeting it. And I hate to say that because I'm just a donut fat guy in the press box, but I'm saying it to counter your argument. I don't mean to criticize young athletes who are doing the best they can in order to support my point. So I'm going to try not to do that. YT Spartan says, it just feels like we're letting women raise our boys. I don't want soft players. If they can't take a coach grabbing their arm, don't want them. James Bannon says, I see Trayvon Morgan has entered the transfer portal from the University of Miami of Ohio. Yeah, Trayvon Morgan, I didn't know that. Trayvon Morgan, you're talking about the wide receiver, right? That had a nice touchdown against Penn State 2 years ago. Big wide receiver out of Ohio. Really looked good. Entered the portal. That was a surprise. I didn't realize he went to Miami of Ohio. Maybe didn't get the type of attention that he was expecting. Now he's back in it. A guy with ability, but kind of hated to see him go for a Michigan State fan, but they're doing pretty good at wide receiver now. But there's going to be a lot of stories like that where they think grass is greener to leave, and there's going to be some sad stories. YT Sparty says, Izzo's 2 seasons away from a potential national title team and was beating Duke in the tournament. I don't see Izzo declining. Tone C says, no, there was a new offensive line transfer today from Colorado. His name is Carson Lee. Cap recruited him to Colorado in 2020. All right, I'm going to look into that. Carson Lee. I'm sure it's already been talked about on the Underground Bunker, but I'll have to look into that one again. I wouldn't doubt it. COVID messed up MSU basketball, YT Sparty said. I would agree with that. On some other fronts, and probably don't have time to get into that. I know that COVID was a hassle for everybody, but kind of it hurt Michigan State in some other ways. They missed the 2020 season, and when that season was short-circuited, Izzo, one of the things that makes Izzo's program effective is success in March. And yes, he is a dictator, and yes, he is demanding. And the players usually know that when they come in, and they write down their goals, and he makes them state that he's going to kick them in the rear to make them chase their goals. And sometimes it's difficult. But if you get to March and you get to a Final Four, then it really helps strengthen the family bond. Like when they got to the Final Four in 2019, all of a sudden, Gabe Brown was like, oh, I see what this is about. He's a freshman, but in Bingham, oh, okay. That's the promised land. That's how you get to there. And then in 2020, if they'd have made another run, then Malik Hall gets it. And if Hauser would have been allowed to play, maybe he gets it. And maybe that makes Malik Hall a little bit different of a personality this year if he had that to draw upon during his freshman year. So yes, it's difficult and it is boot camp, but when they get that payback, it reinforces all that and it helps play it forward. They missed that in 2020, so you kind of get a lost generation in there a little bit. TaylorMade Basketball says he barely made the tournament last year. Now you say, all right, so he barely made the tournament last year. Kentucky did not make the tournament last year, neither did Duke. So Calipari, the games maybe passed him by also. And they lost to St. Peter's in the first round. So Calipari doesn't know what he's doing now, probably either. He says he barely made the tournament the last 2 years. Now you say 2 seasons away, he doesn't even know how he wants to play at point guard. He's got kids spilling time. He way more than 2 years away. I don't disagree I would not agree that they're 2 years from a national championship right now. It's hard to visualize that at this point. I would agree. YT Spartan says you don't think Winston's team was a national title team. I guess what YT Sparty's saying is they were 2 years away from a national championship type of team in 2020. I would agree with that. TaylorMade Basketball says, I'm not sure Winston's brother dying. He lost love for game, and they were only going as far as he would take them. I agree. Winston, that tragedy had an impact on him, obviously, and the team. But they still had Winston. They were doing some good things at the end of the year, and the combination of Winston and Tillman was very strong, very strong. So we'll never know. But I think that they would have been tough. YT Sparty says, yeah, it's easy for Coach K to let them play. They got 5 NBA starters. Steven Eileve says, Huggy Bear brought his Cincinnati team here, and the Spartans beat them. Huggy wished his teams a lousy Christmas. That's right. That was back in, was that 1992? That's right, when Huggins was just getting it going. They made the Final Four that year with Nick Van Exel and some of those guys. But Cincinnati at the time was considered a mid-major. They were kind of beneath the radar. They lost to Heathcote, and it was just before Christmas, and Huggins was all mad and says, I wish my kids a lousy Christmas. Kind of funny. Peyton Fleetmeyer says Ronald Williams was the 12th best player in the 2019 class. You're talking about 2019 junior college class, probably. Alex James says they can go play for Calipari, who rarely makes the Final Four despite his high recruits. Dog Kenneth says Ashton Lepo is 300 pounds now per his interview on Gavin Broch's podcast. Okay, Lepo just keeps getting bigger, so the last I heard it was 280. Bill the Butcher, Alex James says. Was he the redhead, or was he the guy with the top hat and the greasy black hair? I don't know. Gangs of New York. Disturbing movie. Great movie. James Bannon says you need to use those ignore buttons. YD Spartan says Purdue hasn't had a Final Four in the last 40 years. TaylorMade Basketball says, hard to replace a legend. That's true, Paul, but at the same time, he can't coach. Forget. So tell us, who do you think will be next? Who do you think the next coach will be? YT Sparty says that Purdue is a good program. Early Wren says these kids on the Michigan State basketball team mentally checked out. James Bannon says Izzo might have gone to the more Final Fours, not being a 1 or 2 seed than any other coach. YT Spartan says, I still say COVID threw Izzo's program off. All those transfers and being sick, the players had a hard time. I agree with that. I know everybody had to deal with COVID, but Michigan State especially, it upset the apple cart at a key juncture. TaylorMade Basketball says, hard TV replace a legend. That's true, Paul, but he can't get coach forever. So tell us, who do you think the next coach will be? He's losing credibility. Steven Eileve says, Purdue hack guy on Big Ten Hoops broadcast seems to be jealous of MSU. Keith Appling is the name, Paul. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Keith Appling, thanks. Appling was the guy that was injured. My name is Jim Comparoni, by the way, not Paul. Gordon Tanonis says, tailor-made basketball, what alternative university you live in? Alex James says, Butcher was the top hat guy. Butcher, thanks. All right, so we're clear on Gangs of New York, clear on some other stuff, and we've all learned a little bit more about ourselves. Appreciate everybody for coming in and the questions and everything. Sorry we went so long, another 2 hours and 40 minutes. My voice almost made it the whole way. We look forward to coming back and arguing all these points more as we head into next week, going into spring football and the spring scrimmage. We'll have coverage over at SpartanMag.com. More headed toward next Saturday, and then getting back into solid recruiting, more and more recruiting coverage when the camps begin, and continue in the Midwest and so forth. It's going to be a lot of fun. Appreciate everybody here. Hope I didn't disrespect anybody too much. I apologize about that. Appreciate everybody coming in, tuning in, be a part of it. We'll see you next time. We have lovely parting gifts for everybody that participated. See you next time. Thank you. Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching Spartan Mag Live. See you next time.